Hello everyone, I know you are going to use this video for falling asleep, so before that, like this video, subscribe to the channel and let me know where you are from, also what time is it. The last known photo of the Wilder house was taken in 1978. It was blurry, oddly lit, and appeared to have a face in the second-story window, though everyone agreed that no one had lived there for decades. That image would later become infamous, a centerpiece in a case that would chill an entire state and give rise to whispers, documentaries, and forums buried deep online. But before the myth swallowed the facts, before the house was swallowed by the woods, something happened. Something no one could explain. Something no one should have survived. It begins with a phone call at 2:43 a.m. Detective Alan Hargrove hadn't slept more than 4 hours a night since the Brighton butcher case 2 years ago, and tonight was no exception. The call came from dispatch, urgent but vague, a frantic 911 call placed by a group of teens claiming someone, or something, was inside the Wilder house. That alone would have been enough to get Alan's attention. But what froze the blood in his veins was the fact that the house had been legally condemned in 1969. No electricity, no running water, and no working phone lines. Yet the call came from a landline, traced, impossibly, to that very address. Alan didn't waste time. He threw on his jacket, clipped his badge to his belt, and drove straight into the fog-drenched woods at the edge of town. No one ever went near that place willingly, not since the summer of 1956, when the Wilder family vanished without a trace. Mother, father, 2 kids. No signs of struggle, no bodies, just dinner set on the table and a rocking chair that never stopped creaking even when the wind died. Since then, every attempt to demolish the house had ended in accidents. Equipment failures, disappearances, fires that burned cold. As Alan made the sharp right turn onto the overgrown path, the trees seemed to lean in closer, branches clawing at his windshield like they wanted to keep him out, or trap him in. His headlights flickered. Static hissed from the radio even though it was off, and just for a moment, he thought he saw someone standing in the road. Not someone. A silhouette. No features. Just watching. By the time he slammed the brakes, it was gone. He pulled up to the gates, what was left of them, and stared at the house. Wilder House had always looked wrong. Not old, not abandoned, just wrong. It leaned slightly to the left, but not in the way buildings do when they settle. More like it was listening, waiting, watching. The second-story window was broken, curtains torn and flapping in the breeze, but behind them, there was a light. Alan drew his gun and radioed in. No answer. He tried again. Static, and then a whisper, a low one, not through the radio. Right behind him. He turned around, gun up. No one there. Trying to shake off the rising dread crawling up his spine, he stepped out of the cruiser and walked toward the porch. Each step felt heavier than the last, like the ground itself was resisting him. The door, which had been boarded up for years, hung wide open. Fresh scratch marks trailed down the frame, long and deep, like claw marks, but uneven, too jagged, too erratic. Inside, it was pitch black. He flicked on his flashlight. The beam cut through the dark like a blade through thick smoke. Dust danced in the air, disturbed for the first time in years. The floorboards groaned, not under his weight, but like they were breathing. He called out, "Police! Anyone inside?"
Identify yourself!
Silence. Then a soft thud upstairs. He moved through the hallway slowly, gun up, flashlight steady. The wallpaper was peeling, covered in strange symbols drawn in something dark. Not red, not brown. Something that shimmered wrong. As he passed by a shattered mirror, he caught a glimpse of himself, but it wasn't his reflection. His face was staring back at him, but the eyes were gone. Just black pits. And the reflection smiled. He whipped around. Nothing. Another thud. Closer this time. He climbed the staircase, every step protesting loudly, echoing like a scream in a cathedral. The second floor felt colder, wronger, like it existed slightly out of phase with the rest of the world. There were more symbols here, scrawled hastily, desperate, and then he heard it, a laugh, small, a child's laugh, but twisted, like it came through broken glass. He followed the sound to a door at the end of the hall, slightly ajar. Light spilled from the crack, flickering like candlelight. He pushed it open with the barrel of his gun. 4 teenagers stood inside, huddled together, eyes wide, mouths trembling. One of them, tall, with a bloodied forehead, pointed at the corner of the room without speaking. Alan turned his light. The 5th teen was there, or what was left of her. She hung upside down from the ceiling, wrists and ankles bound in barbed wire. Her mouth was sewn shut with black thread, eyes wide and glowing faintly. Her chest moved. She was alive. Before Alan could move, the air in the room dropped, ice cold. His breath froze mid-air, and then every candle in the room went out at once. Darkness swallowed them, and something laughed again. Not the child this time, something deeper, older, like the house itself was pleased. Alan grabbed the teens, pulled them out, stumbled down the stairs. As they ran, the walls bled, the paintings twisted. A woman's voice screamed from inside the walls.
Yo, you lot charm iron.
They burst out onto the porch, the front door slamming shut behind them with a boom that shook the trees. One of the kids collapsed on the grass, sobbing. Another kept whispering. It was her. It was the girl in the photo. She opened the door. Alan didn't ask questions. He drove them to the station in silence. All 5 of them. The 5th girl, yes, the one bound in wire, was now sitting calmly in the back seat. No wounds. No stitches. No glow in her eyes. Just a quiet smile. And when Alan looked at her through the rearview mirror, he saw nothing. No reflection. That night, the Wilder house went dark again. No more light in the window. No more whispers. The path leading to it disappeared within a week, overgrown as if it had never been there. And every photo of that house taken after that night, blurred, warped, faces stretched, eyes missing. 2 days later, the 5th girl vanished from the station. Her cell was locked, no signs of forced exit, but carved into the wall were the same symbols Alan had seen inside the house, and one word beneath them. Open-end. The case was closed without answers. Officially, it was listed as mass hysteria. Unofficially, the station was never the same. Officers transferred, files disappeared, and Alan Hargrove, he stopped sleeping. Because every night at exactly 2:43 a.m., his landline rings. He doesn't own a landline. He disconnected it years ago, but it rings. Always 3 times. And if he answers, he hears a child's voice say, "You let them in too." Then, silence, but not peace, because something got out, and it wants the door open again. Alan Hargrove hadn't touched a drop of alcohol in over 6 years. Not since the Brighton Butcher case. That night, though, after dropping off his report, carefully edited, deliberately vague, he poured 2 fingers of the cheapest bourbon he could find in the drawer and stared out the window. Rain lashed the glass like fingers trying to claw their way in, and somewhere in the distance, a dog howled like it had seen something it wasn't meant to. The 15's face, the girl who was strung up in barbed wire and then walked out without a scratch, floated behind his eyes like a stain that wouldn't wash out. She had smiled at him, not a thank you, not relief, a knowing smile, as if she'd been waiting for him, as if she recognized him. The reflection in the rearview mirror haunted him, most no features, just blackness, the complete absence of something that should have been there, like a missing piece that somehow completed the puzzle. He didn't sleep that night. Instead, he sat in his living room, the bourbon glass sweating against his palm, waiting for the phone to ring, and it did. Right on time. 2:43 a.m., 3 rings, then silence. But tonight was different. Tonight, there was no child's voice, no whisper, just static, soft at first, almost like the gentle rustle of leaves in a breeze. But then it built, slowly, like something clawing its way through the line, forcing its presence into the room. It filled his ears until it felt like a pressure behind his eyes. Alan dropped the phone, heart hammering against his ribs like a warning. The static didn't stop. It bled into the walls. The TV turned on by itself, just white noise on the screen, and the reflection staring back at him wasn't his. It was the girl. Only she wasn't a girl anymore. She was grinning, her mouth far too wide, stitched corners pulling as she leaned closer to the glass. Her eyes were pits of black fire, and behind her, the Wilder house stood whole and alive. Not abandoned, not rotting, thriving, pulsing, like it had been fed. Alan staggered back, the TV bursting into sparks as the screen shattered on its own. The static vanished. The lights went out. For a moment, the house was silent. And then came the knock. 3 knocks on the front door, measured. Confident, he didn't move. Not right away. Instead, he reached for his sidearm, even though something deep in his gut told him it wouldn't matter. Whatever was out there wasn't made of anything that could bleed. He approached the door slowly, each step feeling like he was sinking into something thick and cold. When he opened it, the porch was empty, but the air smelled like mildew and burnt hair. Something had been there. And at his feet lay a single photograph, old and yellowed at the corners. He picked it up and stared. It was the inside of the Wilder house. The kitchen, untouched since the 50s. The table set for 4, and seated at that table was him. Detective Alan Hargrove, clear as day, in his current clothes, badge clipped to his belt, staring dead into the lens with eyes black as coal. In the background, that girl, no, that thing, was watching from the hallway. He dropped the photo like it had bitten him. The next morning, Alan went back to the station. He needed information. Real, hard, tangible details about the Wilder family, the house, and anyone who had ever set foot inside. He started digging. Old case files. Microfilm. Newspaper clippings so brittle they nearly crumbled in his hands. And what he found made his stomach churn. The Wilder family didn't just vanish in 1956. There were whispers of strange behavior leading up to it. Unusual symbols etched into their barn. Neighbors reporting screams at night. Lights flickering. Doors slamming. And then, exactly 6 months before they disappeared, came the first report of a mirror that didn't work. A local boy claimed he'd looked into a mirror in the Wilder's hallway and saw a version of himself that didn't blink. That didn't breathe. A version that smiled back and bled from the eyes. Alan kept digging and came across something even stranger. The Wilder house had been built in 1841 on land originally owned by a man named Gideon Voss, a preacher, charismatic, cult-like. He claimed the house was a doorway to the divine, that inside its walls God whispered directly to him. But his sermons became darker. Talk of sacrifice, of blood feeding the veil. The congregation fled, and then Gideon disappeared. Only a few diary pages remained, written in a fevered hand, repeating one phrase over and over. She waits in the reflection. Do not let her in. She is the mirror. Alan took those words seriously. Too seriously. He boarded up every reflective surface in his home, covered the mirrors, turned off the TV, ducked, taped his phone receiver. But it didn't stop her. The static found other ways in, through the drains. The hum of the fridge, the ticking of the wall clock. She spoke to him in flickers and vibrations, slipping into his thoughts like a song he couldn't stop humming. Then, something horrifying happened. He wasn't alone anymore. People around town started seeing her too. First, it was Officer Green. Said he saw a little girl in the back seat of his cruiser, even though he hadn't picked up a suspect. He crashed into a telephone pole trying to get away. Said she whispered his daughter's name, over and over, even though he didn't have a daughter. Then came Claire, the records clerk. She said someone had been drawing on the bathroom mirror with her lipstick every night. Same message each time, let me out, Claire. It was spreading. The Wilder house might be locked behind trees and silence, but whatever was inside was no longer trapped there. It had slipped out the moment Alan stepped inside that night. It had found a way through. The house didn't need to be entered anymore. It was growing, rooting into people's thoughts, planting itself into the small, dark spaces between what's real and what's just slightly wrong. And Alan, he was the crack, the fracture that let it seep through. But why him? That question gnawed at him like rats in the walls. He turned back to the photo, the one that showed him inside the house. It didn't make sense. Not unless he had been there before. But he hadn't. He couldn't have. Right? Except there was a journal entry, hidden deep in the Wilder family's records, scribbled in a child's hand. The man with the badge comes every Wednesday. He tells us not to listen to the girl in the mirror. But Mommy says he's the one who put her there. Alan froze. He had never been to the house before that night. Had he? Or had he forgotten? What if he had always been tied to that place, looped into its story like a character unaware he was part of the script? What if the mirror didn't just reflect, but remembered? Later that week, a new report came in. Another photo. Another child. Found sitting on the front porch of a house 5 miles from Wilder's land, curled up, crying. When asked who she was, she whispered, "I came from the glass." He let me out. She didn't speak again. Alan knew then what had to be done. The house wasn't the root anymore. It was a symptom. The infection had spread, and he was patient zero. The only way to stop it was to go back, not just to the house, but through it. He started planning, gathered tools, maps, built a crude head-mounted camera, left letters, one for the department, one for his sister, one for himself. And then, on the 7th night after the first call, at 2:43 a.m., he returned to the Wilder house. Only this time, the front door was already open, and the house was waiting. Inside, the air was thick with dust and something worse, intent. The static was louder now, pounding like a heartbeat. Walls seemed to breathe, pulling in and out as if the house had lungs. He stepped inside, and the door shut behind him. Alan didn't look back, because in the shattered hallway mirror, his reflection didn't follow. It stayed still, smiling. And then it whispered, "Welcome back." The house wasn't just watching. It remembered. The door slammed shut behind Alan with such force it rattled the very bones in his chest. It wasn't just sound. It was weight, finality. Like the house had drawn a breath and swallowed him whole. The floor beneath his boots felt different this time, almost soft, like rotted wood or damp carpet. But when he glanced down, the surface was smooth hardwood, gleaming faintly under the beam of his flashlight. And yet every step he took squelched, as if he was walking across something organic, something not meant to be felt beneath human feet. He raised the flashlight slowly, casting its narrow glow across the hallway. The symbols were still there, darker now, bolder, as if they'd been freshly painted. They pulsed subtly, just at the edge of sight, like they breathed. Alan tried not to focus on them, knowing deep down they weren't just decoration. They were warnings, or perhaps invitations. In either case, reading them felt wrong, like trespassing inside someone's mind. He didn't speak. Not because he feared alerting something, but because the silence in the house was too thick, too absolute, and any word spoken aloud might not be returned in his voice. The hallway stretched longer than he remembered. Impossibly long. He could have sworn it was just 15 feet the first time he entered. Now it kept going. The edges of his flashlight's beam were swallowed by the darkness, and every door he passed looked the same. Narrow, tall, and shut tight. As he passed the third door, something brushed his coat. He turned quickly. Nothing behind him. But the door he'd just walked by now stood open. Against his better judgment, he stepped in. It was a bedroom, a child's room by the look of it. Faded wallpaper of moons and stars curled at the edges. A mobile above the bed spun slowly, though there was no breeze. The bed itself was untouched. No dust, no creaks. Just waiting. A bookshelf stood in the corner, but every title had been replaced with a single phrase, written over and over on the spine's she's stilater. Alan's pulse ticked up. Then he heard it, a soft humming. A child's voice, off-key, floating through the air like smoke. It was coming from inside the closet. He approached slowly, gun raised, flashlight steady, heart hammering like a snare drum. The closet door creaked open by itself. Inside stood a full-length mirror. It didn't reflect Alan. It didn't reflect the room. It reflected the Wilder house, but clean, polished, alive. And in the mirror's version of the room, a girl sat on the bed, humming softly, sewing something into the fabric of a stuffed rabbit. Her back was turned. Alan blinked, and for a moment he could swear she looked up, eyes meeting his, and she smiled. The humming stopped. The mirror cracked. A line snaked down the center of the glass, jagged and deep. Alan backed away, out of the room, slamming the door shut behind him. He didn't wait to see if the girl followed. Instead, he pressed forward, deeper into the hallway, now noticing how the doors had begun to multiply. 12, then 20, then too many to count. They lined the walls like teeth in a mouth, each one identical, each one vibrating faintly, as though something behind them was pressing against the wood, eager to be let out. Then the hallway ended, but not in a wall. In a room. It was massive, circular, no corners, no edges. A single bulb dangled from the ceiling, swinging slightly though the air was still. The walls were covered in photos, hundreds of them. Pinned, taped, nailed in patterns that made no sense at first glance. Alan stepped closer and his breath caught in his throat. They were all of him. Different years. Different places. Some when he was just a child. Others from the Brighton butcher case. One showed him sleeping in his own bed, last night. Another showed him standing in this very room, wearing what he was wearing now, eyes wide, mouth open in a silent scream. And yet, he hadn't taken a single one. A large frame hung in the center, bigger than the rest, covered in cloth. Alan approached it slowly, dread heavy in his gut. He didn't want to see what was underneath, but he knew he had to. Whatever game the house was playing, this was part of it. He reached up and pulled the cloth away. It was a painting. Hyper, realistic. Too real. It showed the Wilder family, seated at the dinner table, smiling politely. But their eyes were sewn shut, mouths twisted open in a way that suggested they had screamed for too long and too loud. In the background, the wallpaper peeled away to reveal writhing black tendrils, and crouched in the corner of the painting was a figure made entirely of shadow. The face was stitched together like a doll, mismatched eyes, one wide and glassy, the other missing entirely. The shadow figure had his badge, and Alan's face, the painting blood. Thick, black drops oozed from the canvas and fell onto the floor, vanishing into the cracks. The moment he looked away, the cloth he'd pulled off the painting was gone, replaced by a note. Pinned where the eyes of the Wilder family had been, "You keep trying to leave, but you've already let her in." A scream echoed down the hallway behind him, high-pitched, desperate, one of the teens, impossible. He'd left them behind. Another scream, then sobbing, then the sound of feet, bare feet, slapping against the wood. Alan drew his gun again, backing toward the doorway. And then she stepped into the light, the girl from the mirror. Only now, her face was clearer, not young, not old, something in between. Her eyes were pitch black, mouth stitched at the corners. But it wasn't the face that chilled him. It was the familiarity. The way her head tilted, the rhythm of her steps, the look in her eyes when she saw him. He knew her, not from the house, from before. A memory, long buried, clawed its way to the surface. A childhood game of hide and seek. A mirror in his grandmother's attic. The voice that whispered his name when no one else was around. A friend, he'd thought, an invisible friend, one who never left, until one day, the mirror cracked on its own, and his dog went missing the same night. Alan's hands trembled. "You're not real," he whispered. The girl smiled through the stitches. "Neither are you," and then the floor opened up beneath him. He fell, no end, no sensation, just falling, through shadows, through whispers, through memories that didn't feel like his own. Faces flashed by, all versions of him, crying, laughing, screaming, deeing. Then, light. He landed hard, gasping, blinking away the dark. He was standing in his own home, the living room, but wrong. All the corners were gone. The room was perfectly round, and on the wall where his mirror used to hang was a new one. A full-length slab of glass, its frame carved with symbols he now understood as invitations. The reflection in the mirror smiled. It was him, but it wasn't. And it raised its hand. Alan's hand moved with it. He didn't control it. The reflection did. Then it spoke in his voice, but quieter, colder. "You brought me back." The mirror cracked, and everything went dark. When Alan opened his eyes, he expected darkness. He expected that humming static to swarm back into his ears, like 1,000 invisible insects crawling through his skull. But instead, there was quiet, a dense, oppressive quiet, the kind that didn't feel peaceful, but like something holding its breath, watching, waiting. He lay flat on a floor that didn't feel like wood anymore. It was soft, fibrous. It gave slightly under his weight, like old carpet saturated with something damp. But when he sat up and turned on his flashlight, the beam revealed he was no longer in his home. No round walls, no broken mirror, just a room that looked vaguely familiar, too familiar. The air smelled like mothballs and mold, like the inside of an old trunk kept shut too long. Alan's pulse spiked as recognition crept in. He was back in the Wilder house, but not as it had been. This version was intact, clean, maintained. The wallpaper was fresh, pale blue with thin gold lines curling in soft, elegant patterns. It wasn't peeling. The floor was polished. The windows, though covered in sheer curtains, allowed a strange, silvery light to drift through. This wasn't the real Wilder house, not the abandoned, rotted shell he knew. This was the house as it once was, or as it wanted to be remembered, a memory given structure, a lie built with walls. Alan stood up, breath slow and measured, careful not to disturb whatever balance had granted him this moment of calm. He stepped into the hallway, the familiar structure once again stretching before him. But this time, it was alive in a different way. The air buzzed faintly with energy, like the vibration just before a storm breaks. And along the walls, embedded in the wallpaper's swirling pattern, were faces. He didn't notice them at first. They were subtle, hidden among the curls and spirals like tricks of the light. But once he saw one, the others emerged, dozens, hundreds, faces twisted in horror, some screaming, some crying, some expressionless with wide, glassy eyes. They were drawn into the very paper, woven into the house's skin, and they moved, slowly, shifting ever so slightly when his eyes weren't fixed on them. Alan backed away from the wall. Something in the air shifted. He turned and saw a man standing at the end of the hallway. Tall, thin, wearing an old-fashioned preacher's suit, the black fabric slick with age, the collar stiff and white. His face was too far to make out clearly, but Alan didn't need to see it. He knew the name. Gideon Voss, the founder, the preacher, the man who had built this place not to live in, but to open. Detective Hargrove, the man said softly. His voice echoed strangely, like it was bouncing off walls that didn't exist. You've come further than the rest. Alan didn't answer. He raised his weapon slowly, aimed squarely at the man's chest. Gideon smiled, and even from a distance, Alan could see it was all wrong. The smile was too wide, too perfect. But violence won't help you here. You're inside the walls now. Alan blinked, and Gideon was gone. The hallway was empty again. The faces in the wallpaper were all turned toward him now, every eye watching. Judging, pleading, he pressed forward, deeper into the house, trying not to look at them, but they whispered. Softly, words that didn't make sense at first. Bits and fragments. He lead. She never left. You brought her back. The end of the hallway opened into a new room. A sitting room, quiet and warmly lit, like a waiting area at a doctor's office. A fire burned in the hearth, though there was no wood. Just flames suspended above ash. A single chair sat facing the fire, and in that chair was the girl, not the creature, not the stitched mouth and black eyes. This was her. Human, young, 11, maybe 12, pale skin, dark hair braided neatly, hands folded in her lap. She turned when Alan stepped in, and her eyes were impossibly old. "You keep looking for the start," she said. "But it doesn't begin with the Wilders. Or Voss, it begins with you." Alan's mouth was dry. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. "What are you?" She looked back at the fire. "A consequence. You're in my head." "I'm in the wallpaper," she said without a smile. "I'm in the cracks. I'm in the mirror when no one's looking. You fed me. You all did. But you were the first to believe." Alan shook his head. "No, I never." "You forgot," she said gently. "That doesn't mean it didn't happen." The fire flared suddenly, and the room shifted. It tilted slightly, like a boat on uneasy water. The walls groaned, and the faces in the wallpaper screamed in unison. Brief, awful, high, pitched like glass breaking. Alan fell to his knees, covering his ears. When he looked up, the girl was gone. So was the fire, and the room was rotting. Wallpaper peeled in long, wet strips. Mold spread like veins. The chair was now a broken skeleton of wood and rusted nails. The house was waking up. Alan stood shaken and staggered into the next hallway. Everything was changing. Faster now. The clean version of the house collapsing into its true form. Mirrors cracked. Doors slammed behind him on their own. The house was no longer content to show him pieces. It wanted him to understand. And then he entered the room. The one with no corners. Again, but this time it was different. There was no light bulb. No photos. Just a mirror in the center. Tall, towering, covered by a heavy black cloth. He approached it slowly, heart thudding. The cloth twitched. Alan paused. Something moved beneath it. A shape. Subtle at first, then deliberate. As if a hand was pressing against the other side. He reached out. And the cloth pulled itself away. The mirror revealed not his reflection, but a room. His room. His real living room. His jacket draped over the chair. His bourbon glass still on the table, and in the center of the room was him. Sitting, staring, at the mirror. Alan raised his hand. The version of himself in the mirror didn't move. It was dead. Eyes open. Skin gray. Dried blood at the corners of the mouth. And behind the corpses she stood, the girl. She reached forward, placed a hand on the glass, and whispered something he couldn't hear. Then, from behind Alan, real close in the room, a voice spoke. "You didn't escape, Alan. You never left the house." He turned around, and there was no door, no room, just wallpaper, covered in his face. Dozens of them, all screaming, all stitched at the mouth. And they were watching, waiting. The house had swallowed him whole. And this time, it wasn't letting him go. Alan's breathing grew shallow. Not from panic. Panic had passed 2 hallucinations ago. What surged through him now was something colder. A steady, bone, deep knowing that he was no longer moving through a building. He was moving through a thing. The Wilder house wasn't a structure. It wasn't even a place. It was a mouth. And like any mouth, it wanted something inside it. He turned slowly, the walls pressing in closer than before. They pulsed now like lungs, rising and falling in rhythm with his thoughts. Every face embedded in the wallpaper, every scream once muffled by plaster and paint, had grown louder, more urgent, and every one of those stitched mouths was shaped almost like his. Like they had all screamed the same name before the thread closed their lips forever. He pressed a hand to one wall, trying to steady himself, and felt it ripple beneath his touch. It was warm. It breathed back. That's when the seams split open. Without warning, the wallpaper tore from the center, unfurling like a flower made of old skin. Behind it was no wood, no insulation, no frame. There was a tunnel, a black, gaping corridor just wide enough to crawl through, and inside it, faint glimmers, images shifting too fast to name. A child's birthday party, a hospital hallway, a burning crib, a man, Alan, standing at the edge of a mirror, only his eyes missing. He should have run, but part of him understood this was the way forward. Or backward, or sideways. The house didn't obey time. It wasn't haunted. It was the haunting. With a deep breath that tasted like rust and soil, Alan crouched and crawled into the tunnel. His flashlight flickered, then held steady. The air inside was different. Tight. Thick with silence that wasn't silence at all. It was filled with a low, throbbing hum like a dial tone at the edge of hearing, and behind it the whispering. Names, not words. Names? His? Over and over. Alan. Alan. Alen. Alan. Some voices sounded young, some old. Some sobbed the name, others shouted it like a warning. And as he crawled deeper, his own memories began to scatter across the walls of the tunnel like reflections in shattered glass. His childhood bedroom. His mother's eyes the morning his father left. The alleyway behind the Brighton crime scene. The girl's face, the one from the mirror, sewn at the mouth, whispering somehow anyway. He kept crawling and crawling until the tunnel opened up, and he emerged into a space that should not have existed. It was the Wywolder dining room. But again, not as it was. As it had been. The table was set. Silverware gleamed. Food that never rotted sat steaming in platters. The Wilder family sat in their chairs. All four of them, smiling, still, not blinking. Dead. Their eyes were stitched shut, but their mouths were open, as if caught mid-laugh. Alan backed up. But there was no tunnel anymore, no entry point. Just smooth wall, lined with portraits. But not of the Wilders, of him, over and over. Alan in a police uniform. Alan in a mirror. Alan asleep in his bed, his mouth stitched shut, and black tendrils sprouting from the corners of his eyes like veins in a leaf. He turned to run, but the dining room stretched, doubled in size, tripled. Chairs began to multiply. Wooden legs skittering across the floor like insects. More bodies sat at the table now. All of them different versions of him. Each one dressed differently, some smiling, some crying. One with no skin at all, and then a voice, sweet, sit with us. It came from behind him. He turned, and the girl stood at the head of the table, wearing a white dress that seemed to flicker between clean and soaked in blood. Her eyes were bottomless. I saved you a seat, she whispered. No, Alan rasped. No, I'm not one of you. But you are, she said gently. You sat down the first time you saw her. You just forgot. Her hand lifted, pointed to the end of the table. And there it was. A fifth chair. Empty. Waiting. And etched into the backrest in long, jagged strokes Alan. He stumbled backward, knocking over a chair, but the house groaned around him. The walls blood, the ceiling moaned. The floor cracked like ice underfoot. Sit, the girl said, voice lower now. Deeper. No, Alan repeated, raising the flashlight as if it might defend him. The bulb shattered. The house screamed. Not metaphorically, literally. A chorus of voices, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all screaming at once. Not from one direction. From all directions. From the walls. From the plates. From the food. From the mouths of the dead Wilders, now moving, laughing without sound, their jaws unhinged and shuddering. Alan fell to his knees, hands over his ears, teeth gritted against the rising tide of impossible noise. And just like that, it stopped. Silence. Sudden. Surgical. When he looked up, the room was empty again. Except for one thing, a mirror propped against the wall. Not a reflection. A scene. It showed his sister, standing at his front door, confused, knocking, calling his name. Alan, you okay? You haven't answered your phone. He bolted toward it, slamming his hands against the glass, shouting,
Don't come, Ian!
But she didn't hear him. She couldn't. She turned the knob. The front door creaked open, and standing inside was not Alan, it was her. The girl. The creature. The smile stitched at the corners. Alan's scream cracked his throat open, but no sound escaped, just a whisper. Too late. The mirror shattered, and all the pieces around him began to tremble, rising from the ground like broken stars. Alan looked down. The floor beneath him was no longer wood. It was a spiral. and he was standing in its center. It turned, 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 and he fell again, deeper this time, into a house that never ended, into the wallpaper. And this time, the faces he saw in it were smiling. Alan hit the ground with a crack that sent pain lancing up his side, sharp and clean, as if his ribs had been turned into piano keys and someone had slammed their fists across them. For a few seconds, he didn't move. He couldn't tell whether the red in his vision came from blood or the furious strobing light that pulsed through the air like a heartbeat. Not his own. Something larger, older, deeper, a slow, guttural rhythm pulsing through the very floor beneath him. The house wasn't just alive, it was breathing. When he finally opened his eyes, he found himself in a basement, or something that resembled one. It was stone, damp, and low, ceilinged. The air was faded and warm, like the breath of a sleeping beast. There were chains bolted to the walls, thick with rust, some still slick with something too dark to be water. Beneath his palms, the floor squirmed, not literally, but in sensation. Like whatever he stood on wasn't ready to stay still. Alan staggered to his feet, the flashlight long gone, and the only light came from bioluminescent fungus, clinging to the stone like veins pulsing just under skin. He wasn't alone. He knew it before he turned. The way air shifted, the way sound vanished, the way his own breathing began to echo unnaturally, as if bouncing off something invisible standing behind him. He turned slowly. A figure was crouched in the corner, thin, pale, unmoving. It looked human at first, but then it began to unfold. The limbs came first. Too long, too many joints. Then the head, cocked at an unnatural angle, as if the neck had snapped, but no one had told the body to stop moving. Its mouth wasn't stitched. It had no mouth at all. Just a face painted in crude features, eyes smeared black, a smile drawn too wide, like a child's drawing come alive and soaked in vinegar. It didn't move. Not yet. Alan backed toward a narrow passageway he hadn't seen before, flanked by stone pillars carved with the same symbols from the upper floors. Only older, less refined, like the house was repeating itself in a different language. He turned to run. The creature moved. No footsteps. No sound. Just closer. He didn't look back. He sprinted into the passage, barely ducking under the archway. It narrowed as he moved, the walls pressing in, dragging against his shoulders. The smell changed. Less mildew now, more charred wood and copper. He emerged into another chamber. This one stopped him cold. It was a chapel, but not for worship, for sacrifice. The pews were made of bones, real ones, arranged with impossible precision. The pulpit was an altar, slick and still dripping. The walls weren't made of stone, they were flesh. Not living, not rotting, somewhere in between. And in the center of it all stood a mirror, not glass. Water. A suspended vertical pool held aloft in midair, rippling with a current that had no wind behind it. Alan stepped forward, compelled beyond logic or fear. The surface shimmered, and for a moment, it didn't show a reflection. It showed her. The girl. But now she was wearing his sister's face. Her smile was wrong, the eyes too wide, but the voice that came out was familiar. "Alan," she whispered. "Let me in." He stepped back. The water shattered like glass, shards flying into the air and vanishing before they hit the ground. In its place, a stairway spiraled downward, impossibly thin, made of bones and darkness. Alan knew what it meant. Down. Always down. The deeper you went, the more of the truth you saw. The Wilder house didn't stop at the basement. It descended. Every floor a different memory. Every level closer to whatever heart beat at the bottom. He began the descent. Step by step, each level changed. The first was the night his father left, only this time, Alan was the one walking out the door, and his mother was smiling with her mouth stitched closed. The second was the Brighton case. But the bodies were his. Every single one. Faces twisted into masks of his own expression. Regret, rage, guilt, he screamed and kept descending. The third level was a hospital hallway. White, bright, clean, he recognized it, his sister's ward. the one she had worked in before the accident. Only now she was wheeling a gurney with nothing on it. Just a mirror. A long, vertical mirror stained with blood. She looked up at him and said, "She lives here now, in all the exits." Alan turned, trying to run back, but the stairs behind him had vanished. Only the next level remained, yawning open beneath him like a wound. And there, finally at the bottom, was the door, black, beating. It had no handle, only a slot. A small, rectangular frame carved with the word Remember. He reached into his pocket. He didn't know why. He hadn't placed anything there. But his fingers closed around a photo, one of the old ones, of him, and the house, standing in the porch light. Smiling, he slid the photo into the slot. The door opened. Inside was no room, no foundation, no basement. It was a void. And across that impossible chasm floated a single platform, with a mirror, not cracked, not distorted, just a mirror, waiting. He stepped onto the platform. It didn't sway, it didn't rock, it welcomed him. In the reflection, he saw himself, and he remembered. The girl wasn't born in the house. She was made by him, by fear, by belief. By every reflection he ever studied too long, wondering what would happen if it blinked when he didn't. By every moment of doubt, every lie he told himself, every guilt he buried and let rot. He'd fed her, all his life. And now she was him. The mirror pulsed once. He reached out, not to touch it, to enter, to trade places, to set her free. And behind him, the house sighed, content, because the door was open again, and the price had been paid. Alan didn't feel the transition. There was no lurch, no tearing sensation, no blink of consciousness. Just one moment standing on that floating platform, hand outstretched toward the mirror, and the next, existing within it, inside a place not bound by walls, or air, or time. His breath caught, not in his lungs, but in his memory. As though the act of breathing was now a concept rather than a function. There was no body to ground him, no skin to hold him together. Just Alan's awareness, raw and stripped and floating in what he could only describe as a sky made of glass. Endless, weightless panes suspended in darkness, each one angled differently, each one reflecting some version of reality, or worse, unreality. The mirrors stretched infinitely, floating around him like orbiting thoughts. Some held memories, some held possibilities, and some held things that should not have eyes. He drifted, helpless, watching as one mirror turned toward him, its surface rippling. Inside, he saw himself, young no more than 7, sitting in his grandmother's attic. He remembered this. The dust, the heat, the crooked standing mirror tucked between old coats and cracked furniture. He remembered looking into it and seeing the girl for the first time. Not clearly, just a blur behind his reflection, a shadow with pigtails, a hint of a smile that vanished before it could be defined. But now he saw it fully, from outside the memory. The girl had reached out, through the glass, and young Alan had leaned closer. The reflection flickered, shifted. The boy stepped away, but left something behind. A flicker of his own face that stayed grinning even after he turned. That's when the mirror cracked. Just a hairline fracture. But enough. She'd gotten in. Not all at once. Just a thread of her. But that was all it needed. A thread is enough to unravel everything if you keep pulling. More mirrors turned. One showed the Brighton crime scene, but reversed. The victims walked in, unharmed, and Alan stood above them, knife in hand. Tears in his eyes, whispering, "This isn't how it happened." Another displayed his sister, not in the hospital, but in the Wilder house itself. Walking slowly through the hallway, arms outstretched like she was blind. The walls pulsed with movement, and something followed just behind her shoulder, perfectly out of view. Then came the skin. That's the only word that fit it. A mirror as tall as a cathedral wall rotated to face him. Its surface didn't reflect, it breathed. Smooth, pale skin stretched taut across the frame, and beneath it, movement. Faces trying to press through from the other side. Faces he recognized, his own, over and over. Grinning, stitched, screaming. and one voice said, "You're on the wrong side now." The mirror shattered from within. Not into glass, but into flesh. It peeled back, and something emerged. It looked like Alan, but not quite. Taller, thinner, as if his frame had been stretched. Its eyes were polished black, like obsidian marbles reflecting nothing. No soul. Its smile was constant, carved, as if it had been cut into the skin and then taught to pull wider. The doppelganger stepped toward him in weightless silence. "You're not me," Alan said, or thought. The words didn't echo. They simply were. The thing tilted its head. "I'm what's left when the guilt is gone," it replied. Then it reached for him. Alan recoiled, but there was nowhere to run. There were no corners, no floors, no sky. Just the endless library of mirrors, each one revealing a deeper wound. The creature touched him, and it was cold, not the cold of winter or ice, but the absence of memory, the undoing of warmth. Alan felt his thoughts ripple, his name bending, his history tilting. The monster leaned close, whispered, "You're not here to close the door. You were made to keep it open." The mirrors began to hum. Their surfaces flickered faster and faster. Alan caught glimpses of towns falling into silence. Entire neighborhoods empty, with mirrors all left uncovered. Children whispering names in the dark. Eyes appearing in puddles. Mothers smiling too wide when they tucked their children in. Then came the noise. A sound so loud it cracked thought. It wasn't heard, it was felt, like someone drilling directly into his brainstem, trying to unscrew his sense of self. Alan screamed, but no sound came. Just a silent, pulsing wave that poured through him and shook the entire mirror space. The creature reeled back, its smile cracked. Something was interfering. A new light cut across the glass sky, dim at first, flickering, a candle, small, flickering through the dark, then another, then dozens. Flames suspended in blackness, each one hovering before a different mirror, and within each flame, a face. Not Alan's. Children. Dozens of them. Watching. One stepped forward. A boy with curly hair and hollow eyes. His mouth opened. "She's feeding again," he said. "You let her out." Alan felt a weight pull at him, dragging from all directions. "Stop her," he gasped. The boy shook his head. "She's part of you. The only way to stop her is to undo you." The lights began to go out. One by one. Mirror after mirror turned away. Alan's skin, if he had skin, began to split. Not in pain, but like an idea shedding its shape. He looked down and saw himself unraveling, thoughts fading, fears fragmenting. Every regret he'd carried was falling away in flakes, and the girl was collecting them, piece by piece. Smiling. "She's making something new," the boy whispered. "Something that doesn't need to remember." Alan tried to hold on, tried to scream her name, but he had forgotten it. She'd taken even that. Just before everything turned black, one final mirror spun to face him. It showed his sister, standing in front of a bathroom mirror, holding a knife. Her eyes were glass, and her mouth began to smile, slowly, painfully. The screen went black, and Alan was gone, but the house remained, waiting for the next one to look just a second too long. It started with a woman named Lisa Morell, 32, nurse, quiet life. No kids, moved into her sister's house after the funeral, just to settle the affairs while things got sorted. She didn't want to stay there long. She couldn't. Too many echoes of Alan in that place. His scent still clinging to his clothes in the closet. Read books on the nightstand. Old voicemail messages she couldn't bring herself to delete. She only planned to stay a week. 2, tops. But the first night, something felt off. It wasn't anything obvious. The electricity was fine. The water ran clear. The locks clicked just like they should. But the air, there was a heaviness to it. A silence that wasn't natural, as though the house was holding its breath. She chalked it up to grief. Moving in after someone dies has a weight no one really talks about. A sense that their presence still clings to the floorboards, like static in the carpet. She pushed through it. The mirrors, though they unsettled her. All of them. The bathroom mirror especially. Alan had ducked, taped a thick black sheet over it. Folded and stapled at the corners, sealed like it was hiding something more dangerous than a reflection. Lisa assumed it was some paranoid thing from one of his cases. He'd been acting strange near the end, after all. She remembered their last phone call, his voice strained, asking about the girl in the corner, warning her to cover the glass. She'd thought he was drunk. She didn't peel the tape off right away, but after 3 days of brushing her teeth, using the back of a spoon, she gave in. Curiosity isn't always loud. It's a whisper, slow and persistent. And one morning, without really thinking about it, she found herself tearing the tape away strip by strip. Each rip felt like it echoed a little too loudly in the quiet house. The glass was flawless, too flawless. No smudges, no dust. It looked brand new. She stared at herself for a long time, longer than she realized. Something about her own expression seemed strange. Her mouth didn't sit quite right. Her shoulders felt off center. And just as she was about to look away, her reflection blinked. But she hadn't. She froze, breath caught in her chest. The reflection stared back. Then slowly it tilted its head. The movement was slight, deliberate, as if to ask, "Can you see me now?" Lisa stumbled back, heart racing. She turned away from the mirror and bolted into the hallway. But when she reached the kitchen, the living room mirror, one she didn't remember ever being there, was waiting. And her reflection was already inside it, staring out, smiling gently, as though it had never stopped. That's when the knocking started. It came from the bathroom. 3 knocks. Slow, heavy. Lisa called the police. They came, searched the house, found nothing. But before they left, one of the officers paused in front of the bathroom mirror. "Odd placement," he said. "Seems like a bad angle for lighting." Lisa just nodded, unable to speak. That night, she dreamed of the girl. Just flashes at first. A mirror in the attic. A rocking chair that moved on its own. A child's lullaby, distorted, playing backward. And then, at the very end, a face without eyes. Just stitching. Pulled tight like someone tried to seal the mouth, but got confused and closed the wrong part. She woke up with a scream locked in her throat. The mirror at the foot of her bed hadn't been there when she fell asleep. Her reflection stood behind her, smiling. It moved when she didn't. Lisa ran. She left the house that morning. Left everything. Keys on the counter. Lights still on. She walked 4 miles until her legs gave out, then called a friend to come pick her up. She didn't explain. How could she? What do you say when your own reflection starts misbehaving? But the mirror didn't stay behind. The next morning, she found her compact, something she carried for years, had fogged from the inside. When she wiped it clean, her reflection was already turned away, staring at something behind her she couldn't see. It got worse. She saw her reflection in puddles that hadn't formed yet, in car windows that weren't there. She stopped looking into anything even remotely reflective. Started wearing sunglasses all day. Ducked. Taped the TV. Pulled the foil lining out of her gum wrappers. But even when she closed her eyes, she saw her. The girl. The girl who no longer whispered. She screamed now. Loud, every night. At exactly 2:43 a.m. Lisa recorded it once. Played it back. All she heard was static. And underneath it, layered so deep she had to raise the volume until her ears rang, a voice whispered. He opened the door. You have to close it. But how? How do you close a door that no longer exists in just one place? A door that moves, that slithers through reflections, dragging its edges along every mirrored surface it can find. She went back to the house. She didn't want to. Her legs moved without permission. The house wasn't abandoned anymore. It looked normal. Perfect, even. As if it had been lifted out of time, preserved like a photograph. Lisa stepped inside. The front door closed behind her. Of course it did. The living room was quiet. Every mirror was uncovered, clean. Waiting. She made her way to the hallway. Then the bathroom. Inside, the mirror was lit from behind, casting her reflection in sharp relief. It was already smiling. And then, slowly, her reflection raised its hand. But Lisa didn't. Her reflection reached out. Its fingers touched the inside of the glass. The surface rippled like water, and from behind her, a voice said, "You saw me blink." That's all it takes. Lisa turned and met herself. Not a reflection, not a ghost, just her, older, eyes stitched, mouth open, smiling. The mirror shattered, and Lisa was never seen again. But at 2:43 every morning, the mirror in that bathroom begins to fog. Slowly, from the inside, and if you wipe it clean, you might just see her, standing behind you, and if you turn around fast enough, she'll still be there. The boy's name was Julian Marks. 11 years old, quiet, prone to daydreaming, the sort of kid who looked at rain on windows and saw entire stories instead of water. His parents were the type who didn't believe in monsters, ghosts, or those YouTube videos you're too young to be watching. They believed in curfews and grounding and homework before screen time. But when Julian began talking about the man behind the glass, they dismissed it with the tired, polite concern of people who didn't know how to handle nightmares once the lights were on. The first incident was small, barely a ripple. Julian had been brushing his teeth, leaning close to the bathroom mirror, when he noticed his reflection didn't match. Nothing dramatic, just a delay. A fraction of a second slower. Not like lag, more like hesitation. As if the boy inside the mirror was deciding whether to copy him or not. Julian blinked. The reflection blinked too, but with the wrong eye. A subtle switch, so quiet in its wrongness that it left a cold sting in the back of his spine. He told his mother. She laughed. "Your eyes just tricked you. That's how mirrors work sometimes." But Julian wasn't convinced. A few nights later, he woke to find the TV on. Not the screen, just the static sound, the hiss, the grating whisper of white noise filling the room like a thick fog. He got up, unplugged the set, but the sound continued. He followed it, barefoot down the hallway and into the living room. And that's where he saw the man. Tall, thin, wearing something like a preacher's suit, but off. Like someone had described a suit without ever having seen one. The man stood inside the reflection of the darkened TV screen, hands folded behind his back, head tilted to one side. No face. Not really. Just a swirl where features should be, like steam over glass. And when Julian stepped forward, the man stepped forward too. But there was no one in the room. Only the screen. Only the reflection. Julian didn't scream. He couldn't. The sound caught somewhere between his lungs and throat, and just curled up there like a fist. The man raised one hand, slowly, palm flat against the inside of the TV's black screen. Julian mirrored him, but his real hand never moved. The reflection wasn't copying him anymore. It was leading. Julian backed away. The man stayed still. And then, with a slight ripple in the air, he smiled. No mouth. Just the shape of one pressing out from the swirl of skin. Julian started sleeping with his mirrors covered after that. He used posters, blankets, stickers, anything to block out the glass. He stopped brushing his teeth in the bathroom, used the kitchen sink instead. At school, he asked to go to the nurse just to avoid the locker room mirrors. His teachers assumed bullying. His parents assumed hormones. But Julian knew something had seen him, and it remembered. Then, just after his 12th birthday, he began seeing others. Not people. Not exactly. But shapes. Not always in mirrors now. In puddles. In windows. In doorknobs' eyes. Not looking at him, but waiting. Watching. Like fish just under the surface of a black lake. Then came the notes. They started appearing under his pillow. Not in handwriting. Not typed. Just appeared. Slips of thin, yellow paper that smelled like old earth and mildew, the ink fresh but smudged, as if written in a hurry. Always the same words, "You looked too long." The final straw came a week before he vanished. Julian stood in the hallway mirror late at night, watching himself carefully, testing, moving one finger at a time, one eyebrow at a time, trying to see if the reflection would make a mistake. And then it did. His reflection didn't move at all. Julian smiled. The reflection didn't. And then, behind the glass, another version of him stepped into frame, identical. Except its mouth had no lips, just teeth, rows of them. Stacked and crammed like they'd been forced in where flesh didn't allow. It leaned in and whispered something Julian couldn't hear. The mirror fogged instantly, from the inside. Julian dropped the blanket over it and ran. That night, he locked his bedroom door. But he didn't sleep. He kept staring at the sliver of glass in the corner, the edge of his tablet screen, barely visible from the floor. The next morning, his room was empty, the window locked, the door still shut, no sign of struggle. Just a message scrawled on the inside of his closet door, written in a black "Only smear you blinked." His parents called the police. The entire neighborhood searched. Dogs, drones, thermal cameras. Nothing. Not a trace. But 2 nights later, another child, this time across town, claimed to have seen a boy standing in their living room mirror, crying, mouthing words, but not screaming, waiting. And when his mother walked in to see who her son was talking to, she saw nothing, just herself, except she was smiling, and she wasn't. No one builds a house with a room full of mirrors. Not a practical one, anyway. Mirrors break, mirrors warp, mirrors watch. And yet, inside a long, abandoned wing of the Wilder house, sealed behind rotted bookshelves, hidden under generations of filth, there was such a room. A chamber untouched by time, its dust suspended mid, air like it had never dared settle, lit by no bulbs, no lamps, only the cold gleam of reflective surfaces casting stolen light between each other. They say it was first found by a boy named Davis Trent. He wasn't supposed to be there. No one was. The property had been condemned, the land fenced off, the name Wildr scrawled on every map with a thick red X. But Davis was the kind of kid who chased what scared him. He didn't believe the stories. He laughed at the kids who swore they'd seen eyes in the upstairs windows or heard voices in the trees at night. It was just a house, wood and nails. He wanted proof it was a joke. He found the key beneath the porch, tucked in the mouth of a deer skull. He didn't think much of that. He let himself in after dark, flashlight clutched tight, a GoPro strapped to his chest. The first floor was silent, still, sagging with age. Wallpaper curled like dried skin. A cradle in the corner rocked once and never again. Nothing moved. He documented it all. Mocked it out loud to no one in particular. The scariest thing so far, he said into the camera, is the smell. Something died in here. He didn't realize he was right until he found the door. It was behind a half-toppled shelf, almost invisible unless you looked at just the right angle, as though the house wanted it hidden. But Davis found it. It opened without a creak. The hallway beyond led down a tight, spiral staircase, steep and winding, older than the rest of the house, carved directly into the stone like it had been bored by something with fingernails instead of tools. And at the bottom was the mirror room. 23 mirrors, different sizes, no frames. Just glass mounted to the walls like skin grafts. None of them matched. Some were convex, others flat. One was shaped like a coffin. And none of them showed Davis as he was, his image bent. Twisted one showed him older, another younger. One showed him burning. He stared, mouth agape, watching his own flesh melt off bone, while the version inside the glass screamed with joy. He turned to leave, but the door was gone, just gone, and the mirrors were no longer passive. They were watching. The reflections didn't wait for him to move anymore. They moved on their own. Davis stood still, frozen in terror, but his images in the mirrors twitched, turned, grinned, whispered things he couldn't hear. They moved their lips out of sync. One mouthed the word Hail P, another Sty. The coffin-shaped mirror cracked down the middle. A hand pressed through, not made of flesh, made of mercury, reflective but liquid. It reached for him, slow and quivering, droplets slithering down to the floor without ever falling. Davis backed away, nowhere to go. Then every mirror started rippling at once. like glass in water, like something was behind each one pushing out. He turned to scream, and caught his own reflection smiling. Only it wasn't his face anymore. It was hers. The girl. The stitched smile. The empty, bleeding eyes. She whispered without sound, and the lights went out. When Davis was found, weeks later, he was in the middle of the woods, barefoot, covered in mirror shards that had embedded into his skin like glass thorns. He didn't speak. Not for days. Not until someone wheeled a cart past his hospital bed and a stainless steel pan caught his eye. He shrieked, convulsed, tried to claw the glass from his own eyes. When the doctors finally sedated him, they cleaned his skin and found the words carved into his back, letter by letter, like someone had etched them with the edge of a broken mirror, ONEOF, USGOTOUT. The mirror room was sealed again. No one knows who. The staircase collapsed. The bookshelves were never found. The house rearranged itself. But sometimes, in the right light, you can see a faint shimmer through the cracks in the wall, like a surface waiting to be touched. And sometimes, if you're unlucky, your reflection in the hallway mirror will turn around first. There are places that sleep, places that simply exist. Old homes that rot in silence, leaning gently into their own decay, never dreaming, never whispering. But the Welder house is not like that. The Welder house dreams. It doesn't sleep. It waits. Beneath its splintered floors and claw-marked walls, behind every mirror and photograph and grain of dust, it holds on to the memories of every soul that stepped inside. And when it dreams them. This is what Eleanor Voss saw. Long before the house was condemned, long before people spoke the name Welder in fearful tones, there was Eleanor, young, newly married to Gideon Voss, the preacher who had built the house with his own hands. A man who once spoke of salvation, of communion with higher things, but had since grown silent, sullen, obsessed with the basement and its geometry. Eleanor watched the house change as Gideon did. Walls shifted slightly each night. Doors that had never existed appeared and disappeared without sound. The attic stairs stretched one day, then shrank the next. Mirrors warped. Windows stared. But Eleanor stayed, because love, when tangled with fear, is a tightrope that snaps too late. She started hearing the voices not long after Gideon's sermons turned to whispers. She'd wake to sounds from the walls, scratching, low muttering, the wet cough of something trying to form. Gideon claimed they were divine messages. The house is learning to speak, he told her once, eyes glowing with a fever she couldn't name. It's remembering itself. She wanted to believe him. Until she began dreaming through the house. She'd lie in bed, but her consciousness would drift. Float through the walls, sink into the cellar. Slither through the pipes and behind the wallpaper. She could feel the house's bones, its secret tunnels, its cold appetite. She watched herself sleep from the hallway mirror. She saw Gideon speaking to no one in the parlor, hands clasped, weeping, laughing, carving the same sigils into the floor over and over until they bled. And somewhere, always at the edge of her vision, was her. The girl. She had no name yet, no story, just a presence, sitting quietly in corners that didn't exist during the day. Her mouth always stitched, her eyes black and gleaming, like oil spread over ink. She watched Eleanor's dreams like theater, waiting for the final act. Eleanor tried to leave. Once, she packed her things, ran down the stairs, and opened the front door to her own bedroom. Every attempt after that led her deeper in. Every exit became another room, a library filled with whispering books, a hallway that bent in a perfect circle, a dining room where the plates were filled with photographs of her own face, each one older, more decayed. The house didn't trap her. It recycled her. Each time she reached a mirror, she aged, hair turning silver, skin wrinkling. But in every reflection, she still looked 23, until one night, she awoke in a version of her room that smiled. The walls curved. The ceiling breathed. The floor felt warm. Gideon was gone, and the girl was there, standing beside the bed, holding a mirror shard to her own stitched mouth. Eleanor finally asked, "What are you?" And the girl answered, not with sound. But through every surface in the room, her voice was mirrors breaking. A scream frozen in a photograph. She said, "I am what the house dreams when no one is watching." The next morning, the townspeople found Gideon Voss alone on the front porch, rocking gently in a chair that hadn't been there the day before. His eyes were sewn shut with thin gold thread, his mouth filled with ashes. He died before he could speak. Eleanor was never seen again. But sometimes, when the wind blows across the Wilder house, just right, her voice slips out of the cracked foundation. Not a scream, not even a whisper, a song. Soft, lullaby-like. She's in the mirrors. Now I'm in the walls. If you blink too long, you'll hear her crawl. And if you walk by at dusk, when the house is halfway between dreaming and waking, you might catch your own reflection in the window. Older, alone, and smiling. Nobody talks about the Wilder house now, not in any real way. The locals say they've put that part of town behind them, which is a polite way of saying we're pretending it never happened. The overgrowth has taken most of the lot. The trees leaning inward, like they're conspiring to keep what's buried buried. But if you live near the woods, even just close enough to see the treetops from your upstairs window, you know better than to leave your mirrors uncovered after dark, especially in June. That's when the house hums. That's when the static returns. It started up again last week, just after midnight, at a gas station not even 2 miles from where the main path to the Wilder property used to be. The clerk, Elijah Timmons, age 26, had been working the overnight shift for months without incident. He was used to the usual drunks, kids trying to steal energy drinks, the occasional raccoon crawling into the dumpsters. But on a Tuesday morning, he heard the static for the first time. The store's radio was off, no customers inside. But from the CCTV monitor above the counter came a low hiss, like broken glass being rubbed together. He checked the settings. Nothing wrong. He unplugged the monitor. The static continued. Then came the whisper, not through the monitor, through the wires. It vibrated under his fingertips when he touched the counter. He said it felt like something was breathing through the electricity. The lights above began to flicker, and all the glass in the fridge doors started to fog from the inside. One by one, thick condensation obscuring everything. Elijah backed away. Then, on the security monitor, he saw her, standing outside, not moving, not walking, just there. A girl in a white dress, eyes blacked out like burned film, mouth sealed at the corners, staring through the door like she'd been watching the whole time, and behind her the woods. But not the regular kind. The trees looked inverted, upside down or wrong, like they'd grown in reverse, their roots reaching up into the sky. He blinked and she was gone, but not entirely. Every mirror in the station fogged over at once. Bathroom, cooler doors, the backup monitor screen. When he wiped one clean, he didn't see himself. He saw a room, filled with mirrors. And at the center of that impossible space, someone was strapped to a chair. It was him. He tried to scream. Couldn't. Tried to move. Couldn't. Then across the radio, a child's voice crackled. "She's feeding again. Tell them to stop looking." The next day, Elijah quit his job. He doesn't speak anymore. Not unless the lights are off and the walls are covered in aluminum foil. Then, if you're patient, he might say one sentence. "She got in through the static. And now she's under our skin." He scratches his arms constantly, always bleeding. Says he hears buzzing under his veins. He's not the only one. 3 others from nearby towns have shown up at urgent care with the same complaint, a high-pitched sound in their ears that won't stop, paired with visions in reflective surfaces. One man gouged out both his eyes. Said it was the only way to stop her from using his sight like a door. But the worst story came from a maintenance worker named Randy Phelps. He was sent to repair the signal towers near the woods. Nothing serious, just a few flickering connections and some reports of service interruptions. He climbed the tower just before dusk. By the time he got halfway up, his equipment started to buzz, static so loud it cracked his earpiece. Then he saw the trees move, not sway, shift. Like they'd moved closer to the tower in seconds. Like they were listening. And in the clearing below, barely visible through the branches, stood the Wilder house, whole, untouched, lit from within by a flickering yellow glow, as if someone had just turned the lights on for dinner. Randy swore he saw silhouettes in the windows. One tall, one child-sized, the latter turning slowly, eyes shining like polished obsidian. He climbed down in a panic and ran half a mile before remembering he'd left his tools on the tower. He went back the next morning. The tower was gone. Not dismantled. Not damaged. Just gone. The only thing left in its place was a perfectly flat pane of mirror standing upright in the grass. And in that mirror, Randy's own face blinked at him. Twice. He hadn't blinked at all. The company wrote it off as a psychotic break. But Randy hasn't spoken since, and he hasn't left his basement in 3 days. His wife says he just sits in front of the washing machine door, staring into the reflection in the chrome, whispering a name that isn't theirs. Eleanor, and now the power grid is failing again. Flickers in the night. Radios turning on without cause. White noise creeping into headphones and phone calls. Static returning like it never left. People think it's technical, but there's a pattern. All the outages happen at the same time, 2:43 a.m. every single night. And always, in the silence afterward, if you listen hard enough, there's a voice just beneath the hum. She's not in the house anymore. She's in the current. And every mirror starts to hum. Just a little. Enough to get your attention. Enough to make you look. And if you look just 1 second too long, she looks back. Before the city tore the records down into a storage pit of redacted files and shredded pages, there was once a blueprint of the Wilder house, a floor plan submitted back in 1841, signed by Gideon Voss himself. It was simple, modest. 3 bedrooms, a chapel room on the east side, a wide porch that wrapped around like a protective arm. But somewhere between drawing and construction, something went wrong. The paper was a map, but not of what was built. No one noticed at first. Not until the house began to shift. Every decade, it changed. Rooms that never existed were found behind walls. Windows opened to brick. Staircases led to closets too deep to be explained. Surveyors gave up trying to catalog it. One man spent weeks inside, marking rooms with chalk, numbering doors, measuring angles. When he came out, his eyes were bloodshot, and he kept repeating, "There are too many right angles. Some of them bend inward." He refused to speak after that, lived the rest of his life in a church basement, but he drew pages and pages of sketches. Always the same room, a perfect square, no doors, no windows, and always a mirror at the center. This room doesn't show up on any blueprint, but every person who's ever disappeared in the Wilder house has seen it. They call it the nowhere room. And it's where you go when the house wants to remember you. The first known mention came from a journal entry dated 1892, written by a girl named Mary Ellen Piper. She was 16, visiting distant cousins, and had wandered off exploring during a thunderstorm. They found her 3 days later, standing on the roof, barefoot, eyes glazed, mouth whispering to herself through teeth worn down to tiny stumps. Her entry read, "I found the room where the house keeps its thoughts. I knocked. It knocked back. I asked who lived here. It showed me every version of myself that had ever died." What unnerved investigators was the drawing folded in that journal, a simple box, 4 lines, and in the center a circle. Around it, in tiny handwriting, was scrawled one repeating phrase. "Which one am I?" Over time, others encountered it too. The pattern was always the same. They'd open a door they hadn't noticed before. Walk down a hallway that didn't exist the day prior. Turn once, maybe twice, and then there it was. 4 white walls, a ceiling that curved slightly inward, and in the center, a tall mirror that stood on its own with no support. And the moment you stepped in, the door behind you vanished. Some people made it out. Some didn't. Those who did told stories that didn't align. One said they saw their entire life play backward in the glass, but every decision was wrong. Another said the mirror showed nothing but her, the stitched girl, floating behind their reflection, like a ghost trying to put on someone else's skin. One man claimed the mirror was a window, and on the other side, the house looked back, alive, grinning, wearing his face. The house doesn't trap you with chains or locks. It traps you with questions. And the nowhere room is where those questions echo. Lately, rumors have started up again. Contractors hired to demolish old foundations near the property line have gone missing. Surveying drones go blind when flown over the tree line. And someone, no one knows who, sent an anonymous box to the local paper. Inside were 4 photographs. One of a door that doesn't exist in the Wilder house's official blueprints. One of a room, all white, empty, with shadows stretched toward the center. One of a girl, standing barefoot in a corner, her back to the camera, arms dangling like string. And the last, a mirror, shattered. But in each shard a different version of the same man, screaming. The letter included no explanation. Just one line, printed in typewriter ink. She's rebuilding the room from memory. And now, new reports are trickling in. Backyards with fresh doorways and fences that weren't there before. Attics where a new wall appears overnight, cutting the space in half. One woman walked into her bathroom and found a perfect square carved into the tile. She scrubbed it clean, only for it to reappear the next day, deeper. Wider now with a small hairline crack at the center of the floor, like something inside had tapped back. The blueprint never accounted for these places. But that's the trick, isn't it? You can't map a place that thinks. You can't build over something that isn't done building itself. And now the house has started to spread again, not in wood or nails or brick, but in rooms. Rooms that don't need a home. Rooms that make homes out of people. So if one day you notice a door in your house you don't remember installing, don't open it. Don't look inside, because there's only ever one thing waiting there, a room. White. Empty. With a mirror in the center, and a voice behind you that asks, which one are you? There was a time, not long ago, when you could stand outside the Wilder house and hear nothing. Not the wind, not the trees, not even birdsong. The silence wasn't peace, it was vacuum. A complete absence of life, like even the insects knew to stay away. But lately, something's changed. People passing within a block of the property have begun to hear it, low at first, barely audible. A whisper, faint, familiar, always just behind them. Like someone saying their name from inside their own skull. It's been happening more frequently. They don't hear it at the house. They hear it after, hours later, days, weeks. It's not loud, never loud. That's part of what makes it so dangerous. It doesn't announce itself with screaming or crashing or flashing lights. It comes as a breath, a syllable, a hum that stirs something inside you didn't know could be stirred. The voice always says one thing, let me in. It was Detective Hargrove's partner, Marcus Reyes, who noticed it first. Months after Alan vanished, Marcus began combing through the case files again. Every folder, every tape, every redacted memo that no one had the stomach to examine. It wasn't obsession. It was need. The kind that chews at your spine while you sleep and makes your teeth itch in daylight. He started small, timeline reviews, cross-checking witness statements, studying blueprints. But the deeper he looked, the more the patterns began to appear. The audio logs all had subtle glitches at the same timestamp, 2:43 a.m. every single tape, static, then a click, then a whisper, too faint to understand without slowing the speed by exactly half. So Marcus did. And what he heard made him stop breathing. A girl's voice, not frightened, not desperate, calm, He's not gone. He's just further in. He played it again. This time, the whisper came from his apartment walls. He turned off the recording, ripped the headphones away, but the voice didn't stop. He heard it behind the drywall, in the pipes, in the air vents. He didn't sleep that night. He took the tapes to a forensic lab the next morning. No one else heard the voice, not even the audio technician. The waveform showed nothing, just static, silence. But Marcus kept hearing it, everywhere, at the grocery store, at the precinct. Once, in the reflection of a bus window, he saw himself mouthing the words silently as they echoed in his ears. Let me in. Let me in. Let me in. And then the walls started breathing. It happened in his apartment. First, the wallpaper began to peel back in slow curls, revealing dark stains beneath. Circular, rhythmic, like something had pulsed against the plaster from the other side. His bathroom tiles cracked in a perfect spiral. His closet door no longer led to clothes. Just darkness. He moved out. Didn't matter. The whisper followed. One night, he woke up to find his living room mirror fogged. He hadn't showered. There was no moisture in the apartment. But the fog pulsed outward, spreading in a slow, deliberate heartbeat. And when he wiped it away, the face looking back wasn't his. It was Alan, eyes black, mouth stitched, and behind him, the girl. She reached forward, touched the inside of the mirror, and suddenly the whisper was no longer in the walls. It was in his veins. He felt it in his pulse. A static buzz thudding beneath his skin, carrying her voice through his bloodstream. She didn't scream. She didn't threaten. She promised. Everyone who hears me becomes part of the house. Marcus went silent after that, stopped going to work, stopped answering the phone. His neighbors said he boarded up every mirror, then painted his walls red with strange symbols that bled through every coat of paint. One of them broke into his apartment after 2 weeks of total silence. They found no body, no note, no blood, just a tape recorder spinning endlessly on a loop, playing static broken by long, measured silences. And in one of those silences, buried deep within the nothing, a whisper spoke clearly. He finally let me in. Now others have begun hearing her. Not all at once. Not all the time. Just enough to doubt themselves. You'll be driving, and the radio will hiccup mid-song, twisting the melody into a long, breathy hum. Or your phone will buzz at 2:43 a.m., no caller ID, just silence when you answer. Or maybe you'll be alone in your room, and suddenly, the crack between your dresser and wall feels too wide, like someone's waiting behind it with their lips pressed to the plaster. It's always the same voice, always a girl, always patient. She doesn't shout, she waits. Because if the house taught her anything, it's this: walls remember. Plaster listens, and if you whisper to someone long enough, they'll start whispering back. The house doesn't need rooms anymore. Now it has voices. Yours might be next. There's a reason people stopped filing missing persons reports near Wilder grounds. Not because they stopped disappearing, but because the ones who came back weren't missing anymore. They were changed. Quiet. Eyes too still. Smiles that never matched the moment. Townsfolk learned to let them be, to move away if necessary, to forget. Because forgetting, in some cases, is the only thing that keeps the thing inside them from remembering where it came from. But not all of them stayed forgotten. A group formed in secret, ex-patients, silent survivors, people who had vanished for days, weeks, months, only to reappear on doorsteps or hospital floors with mouths sewn shut and no memory of where they had been. They called themselves the Thresholders. Not a cult, not a community. Just people trying to understand what had touched them without ripping themselves open in the process. They believed that some part of the Wilder house existed outside of location, not tethered to the old foundation in the woods, not even to the mirrors. It had become a memory that feeds on memory, a thing that doesn't live in time, but between it. And it leaves something behind when it touches you, a fracture, a ripple, a sliver of itself. They say everyone who's been inside the Wilder house leaves with her fingerprint. Most never know it. Most never feel it. But some do. And when they do, they start remembering things that never happened to them. That's what happened to Miriam Bell. She was just a girl when it started. 9 years old, living on the edge of town, nowhere near the Wilder property. Her mother said she began sleepwalking, often ending up in front of mirrors, hands pressed flat against the glass, eyes wide open, unblinking. They chalked it up to stress, gave her sleeping meds, therapy. Nothing worked. Then Miriam started drawing things, blueprints, not of houses they knew, rooms that shouldn't exist, spirals and hallways that looped back on themselves, doors with no hinges, and always, in the center of her pages, the girl, smiling, eyes hollow, thread looped between her lips like it had been fed through a needle. When asked who she was drawing, Miriam always gave the same answer. She's the one who got forgotten. By 12, Miriam stopped talking altogether. Her voice came only through sketches, symbols etched into walls, windows, even her own skin. One night, her father found her in the basement standing before the furnace, whispering into the dark. There was no one there, just shadows, until he turned to leave and saw something in the reflection of the fuse box panel. A second Miriam, older, smiling, reaching out from behind the glass. After that, they locked every mirror away, moved out of town. But the house wasn't done with her. At 13, Miriam vanished for 4 days. When she came back, she had carved 3 letters into her stomach with a piece of broken window pane, Minnow W. No one knew what it meant, but she did. Years later, when she finally found the thresholders, she told them that's not a time. It's a place. The house doesn't live in the past or future. It exists now, always. For anyone who remembers it. They asked her what the house wanted. Her voice trembled. To be remembered, to keep dreaming, and to never be alone again. Some tried to burn her sketches, but the shapes came back in their sleep, carved into their eyelids, scratched onto their walls. The house doesn't let its thoughts die quietly. The thresholders made one final attempt to map it, to go in one last time with everything they had, cameras, GPS, audio logs. 6 of them entered. Only one returned. His name was Dean Keller. He emerged on the side of the road 40 miles from where the house should have been, barefoot and bleeding from the ears. He held a single mirror shard in his hand. When the EMTs pried it from his fingers, they saw his name carved into the reflective surface, written from the inside. Dean never spoke again. But he wrote, not words, numbers, coordinates, timestamps, a constant flood of data that led to nowhere. Until one researcher noticed something strange. The numbers weren't locations, they were names, mapped against birth certificates, all real, all belonging to people who had gone missing within a mile of the Wilder house over the last 150 years. It was a census of the forgotten. The house was keeping track. The more names Dean wrote, the faster his body broke down, as if he was unspooling from the inside out, the weight of too many memories collapsing in on themselves. One night, he scrawled a final phrase across the wall of his room before vanishing completely. We were the walls all along. Now, others who visit the area report hearing whispers, not just calling their name, but listing names. First and middle, last. Some they know, some they've never heard, some that belong to people who haven't been born yet. And somewhere, between each breath of wind, a voice curls beneath the leaves like smoke. No one leaves unless someone takes their place. Because the house doesn't just collect people. It collects possibilities, and when it forgets you, you don't disappear. You become part of the structure. A face in the wallpaper, a hand behind the glass, a voice in the wall waiting to be heard again. Because someone always listens. And when they do, the house remembers. It always starts the same way. You're just drifting off, somewhere between consciousness and that deep, sinking spiral where dreams start to stretch your memories into fiction. And then it happens. A sound, soft, familiar. like your name being said from behind a closed door. But it's not someone calling you. It's something nudging, testing. The Wilder house has found a new path in, and now it walks the fragile seam between dreams and waking. And when it finds the crack, it slips in like smoke. This is how it reached Claire Yates. She'd never set foot near the Wilder property. She was a city girl, far removed from the woods and the stories whispered in schoolyards. Claire worked 2 jobs, kept to herself, rarely even watched the news. But something still found her. Something buried deep in the corners of her sleep. At first, she thought the dreams were just stress. Her apartment began to change in subtle ways, corners becoming slightly curved, shadows lingering longer than they should. Every night, she dreamt of corridors, endless hallways with no doors, white walls, smooth floors, and a sound like breathing but too steady, like a rhythm, like waiting. The first time she saw the mirror, it was propped against the wall at the end of one of those corridors, bathed in pale, sourceless light. In the dream, she approached slowly, the air thick and warm. Her footsteps didn't echo. When she reached the mirror, there was no reflection. Only her, but wrong. Standing on the other side, back slightly arched, mouth soon shut, head tilted as if listening through layers of glass. Claire touched the mirror. Her reflection didn't move. It stared, it pulsed, slightly, as if its skin were made of liquid stretched tight across a shell. And then she woke up, sweating, heart racing, the taste of ash in her mouth. Each night, the dream picked up exactly where it left off. The mirror got closer. And then, one morning, her bathroom mirror was broken. No sign of a break-in, no fallen objects, just shattered down the middle, a single vertical line like a wound that hadn't yet bled. On the counter beneath it, she found a message scrawled in fog. Though there hadn't been steam in the room, "We're almost touching." She tried not to sleep after that, took caffeine pills, worked longer hours, let herself drift only when exhaustion forced her. But the dreams didn't need her to be fully asleep anymore. They began to intrude in flashes. While blinking, while looking too long into shop windows, car mirrors, the sheen of a coffee pot. Little slips in reality, just long enough to see something standing where she should be. Something wearing her skin like a coat with the buttons done wrong. She started recording herself while she slept. At first, there was nothing. Then came the audio glitches, clicks, whispers, and in the background, a voice humming a lullaby she didn't recognize but somehow knew. Then the video feed started to warp. At 2:43 a.m. every night, her sleeping self would sit up, slowly, and stare directly into the camera. Eyes wide, mouth twitching, hands twitching, as if trying to remember what fingers were for. One night, her sleeping body reached toward the lens. The feed cut. The next morning, the footage was gone. All of it. Replaced by a single static frame, Claire's bed, empty. The wall behind it, bare, except for a mirror that wasn't hers. She smashed every reflective surface in her apartment. Microwave, phone screen, chrome faucet. She unplugged the TV, pulled the fuse from the bathroom light. But it didn't matter. The house had already mapped her mind. And now, it built new rooms inside her. Her dreams changed. They were no longer places she wandered through. They were places she hosted. Guests began to arrive. Not people, not spirits. Rooms. They'd appear behind doors in her dreams. A nursery with a mobile that spun without air. A kitchen table set for 4. The plates filled with her baby teeth. A living room where all the picture frames showed her, aged into a skeleton, staring back through centuries of dust, and always the mirror. Closer, waiting. One night in the dream she stepped through, no pain, no fall, just arrival. The house was vast inside, not wood, not stone, memory, formed from every fear, every fragmented thought, every forgotten heartbeat. It was made of moments that had nowhere else to live. And in the center, on a chair made of glass, sat the girl. Claire recognized her instantly, the smile that didn't bend, the eyes that didn't close. "You dreamed me," the girl said. No, Claire whispered. You're just a story. The girl nodded. And now I'm yours. Claire tried to run, but the floor rippled under her feet like a dream collapsing. Mirrors rose around her, encasing her in a prism of glass, each one showing a different version of herself, laughing, screaming, drowning. One stood perfectly still, tears leaking from stitched eyes. You can't wake up until someone takes your place, the girl said. Claire opened her mouth to scream, and woke up, in bed, soaked in sweat, alone, until she saw the mirror across the room. It wasn't hers, it hadn't been there before, and in it, she wasn't asleep. She was smiling. She tried to move. Couldn't. Her limbs didn't respond. Her reflection reached out, placed a hand on the glass, and whispered, "Your turn to dream me now." She didn't go to work that day. No one heard from her again. But in the apartment next door, a tenant reported something strange that night, soft footsteps pacing back and forth. A steady rhythmic sound, followed by faint tapping like fingers against glass. It stopped at 2:43 a.m., and when they opened their bathroom door the next morning, a new mirror stood where the sink used to be. It was warm to the touch, and inside it, something breathed. The thing that came back to Derek Shaw wasn't his wife. It had her voice, her laugh, her memories. It knew how she stirred her coffee in lazy circles before taking the first sip, how she cried at nature documentaries, how she tucked one foot under her leg when reading. But Derek knew, he knew, it wasn't her. Because when Evelyn vanished that night near the Wilder house, something else stepped out wearing her skin, like it had been practicing her for years. They'd been driving home from a dinner party, the long road, the one that curved along the old edge of town where the streetlights grew scarce and the woods pressed in close. Evelyn had always said that road made her nervous, but it was quiet, peaceful. Until they hit the fog. It rolled in like a curtain, thick and fast, swallowing their headlights in seconds. Derek slowed the car, heart starting to race, but Evelyn unbuckled her seatbelt. "I saw something," she said, voice distant. Before he could respond, she was out of the car and gone into the haze, disappearing into the trees with a calm that didn't belong to her. By the time Derek found her, standing in a clearing, motionless, facing an impossible structure that flickered between a house and something else, she was different. She turned to him, smiling, eyes glassy, and said, "It's smaller on the outside." Then she collapsed. When she woke up, she didn't remember the drive, or the fog, or her name, but she knew him. She knew things she couldn't have. Over the following weeks, Derek tried to convince himself it was just trauma. That the house, the Wilder house, looming through his thoughts like a tumor, had spooked them both. But little things piled up. Evelyn didn't blink when startled. She never slept. Her shadow lagged behind her movement by a breath. Once he caught her reflection in the kitchen window, still chewing when her real mouth had stopped. He tried to ignore it. Love does that. It tries to smooth over the edges of the impossible. Then came the guest room. They'd never had one. Their house was small, one bedroom, one bath. But one morning, Derek woke to find an extra door at the end of the hallway. White, simple, shut tight. He assumed he was dreaming. Touched the handle. Cold, he opened it. A perfectly square room, empty. No windows, no furniture. Just smooth white walls and a mirror mounted in the center. Evelyn stood behind him suddenly, voice gentle. "You shouldn't go in there," she said. "It remembers people." He slammed the door shut, and when he turned to question her, she was already walking away, humming a song he'd never heard. That night, he tried to leave. Keys gone, phone dead. Every window in the house now showed other versions of their home. Same furniture, different lighting. Once, he looked into the hallway window and saw himself standing at the end, back turned, motionless. Evelyn began changing more. She stopped pretending to eat. She answered questions before he asked them. She called him names he'd never told her. "Darling," "Little mirror." He asked her once, Directly, who are you? She smiled, mouth stretched tight, eyes shimmering. Do you want to see? She led him to the guest room. The door opened on its own. The mirror inside was covered now, draped in black fabric. Evelyn reached up and pulled it away. What he saw inside wasn't a reflection. It was a loop, a moving image of himself. Waking up, finding the door, walking down the hallway. Over and over. The mirror showed this moment, but slightly off. Evelyn wasn't there. The lighting was dimmer. And the version of him in the glass was weeping. Then the mirror changed. Showed the Wilder house. Showed Evelyn standing at its threshold, reaching out, hand pressed to the doorframe. A voice, not hers, whispered, "Let me wear it." The scene blurred, shifted. Now Evelyn, his Evelyn, was screaming, clawing at the inside of a mirror. Not this one. Another. Buried in a room somewhere deep. Her hands were bleeding. Her mouth moved but made no sound. And then a different version of her stepped into frame, smiling, pulling the real one away into blackness. The mirror cleared. Back to Derek. Back to now. Behind him, Evelyn whispered. She fit better than expected. He turned. She didn't stop him this time. He ran, through the hallway, past the kitchen. Every room was slightly wrong now, paint warped, furniture subtly moving when he wasn't looking. He reached the front door, yanked it open. A wall of mirrors blocked his path, every one of them showing his face, aging, crying, breaking, and all of them smiling. He blacked out. When he came to, he was back in bed, Evelyn beside him, stroking his hair like a child's. "You're tired," she said. The guest room was too loud. He tried to scream. No sound came out. He rushed to the mirror in the bathroom. His mouth was sewn shut, eyes wide, silent. In the reflection, Evelyn stood behind him. Not Evelyn, just the guest. And she was humming that lullaby again. Now, no one hears from Derek. The house stands quiet. The door at the end of the hallway doesn't open anymore. But sometimes, neighbors say they hear something faint through the walls. The sound of a man weeping. And the soft, gentle rhythm of a lullaby playing backwards. You used to have to go to it. Drive the cracked road past the tree line, take that wrong turn into the overgrown woods, feel your tires shudder over roots like knuckles under skin. The Wilder house stayed still then, waiting, coiled in its rot and silence, but not anymore. Now it moves, quietly, patiently. It doesn't need a foundation to take root. It only needs you to remember it, and once you do, it begins to follow. For Laurel Hyde, it started with a dream. She was thousands of miles away, living in a brick apartment in a city that never slept. She'd never even heard of the Wilder house. Her nightmares weren't about ghost stories. They were about work deadlines and missed trains. But one night she dreamed of a house she'd never seen. She stood in front of it, moonlight hanging sharp over the pointed gables, the porch groaning under her weight as she stepped forward. The windows were black holes. The door opened without a sound. She didn't enter. She woke instead, sweating, a smell in her nose, like old wood and iron. She brushed it off, until the next night. Same dream, only this time, she walked through the door. The air inside was thick and warm, like breath. The hallway stretched long. There was a mirror at the end, and in it, she saw a version of herself standing perfectly still. When she woke again, her feet were dirty, splinters in her soles, and the smell of mildew still clung to her sheets. That was when the house started showing up in other places. Not fully, just hints. A flicker in the reflection of a cafe window. A single step appearing in the alley behind her building. She walked past a construction site and saw the silhouette of a gabled roof through the mesh fencing. One that vanished when she turned around. Her apartment changed next. Corners where there hadn't been corners before. A door that clicked shut even when unlatched. Her bedroom window faced the neighboring building's brick wall. Always had. But now, sometimes, when the moon was right and the shadows long, she could see woods. Not a mural, not a trick of the light. Woods, breathing, moving. Laurel tried to ignore it. She worked longer hours, moved furniture, slept with music on. But one morning, she woke up to find her closet had shifted a few inches to the left, leaving a gap that hadn't been there the night before. Inside the gap, wallpaper, peeling, patterned with familiar swirling sigils. She hadn't installed any. She hadn't touched the walls. When she leaned in to look closer, she heard it. A knock. 3 slow, patient knocks. From inside the wall. She screamed. When she turned, the mirror above her dresser, one she'd never owned, was covered in fingerprints. Children's fingerprints. Tiny, smudged, trailing outward as if something had pressed its hands against the other side, desperate to get out. That night, she went to a hotel. Took nothing with her. But it followed. The same smell greeted her in the room. The sound of the closet door creaking open, the knock behind the headboard, and then, at 2:43 a.m., the TV turned on by itself, flickering static, sharp and violent, then clearing into a single image, the Wilder house. Closer now. Crawling forward through the trees like a predator, Laurel unplugged the television. Didn't matter. The mirror in the bathroom fogged over. She wiped it clear, and saw herself. Inside the Wilder house's foyer. Behind her stood the girl, eyes like oil, smile stitched too tight, and behind her, something worse. Not a figure, not a face. A shadow in the shape of a door, wide open. The next morning, the hotel staff found Laurel standing in the hallway, barefoot, pressing her hand to the fire extinguisher case like it was a portal. Her voice was flat, her pupils dilated. She kept asking, "Did you hear it knock?" "It's knocking. It's already in." She was admitted to a psychiatric ward that day. She hasn't spoken since. But she writes, over and over, drawings of the house, each more detailed than the last. One shows it growing legs. Another, a spine made of staircases. And one, most recent, shows a city skyline with the Wilder house crouched among the buildings, indistinguishable from them except for the windows that blink. Doctors say she's hallucinating, that the trauma of her dreams has fractured her sense of place. But what no one can explain is how, in her most recent drawing, she captured the exact layout of her apartment building, including the hallway where a new door has appeared that no one remembers being built. A white door, no number, no handle, and one night a cleaning woman passed by it and paused. She thought she heard a lullaby coming from the other side, one that sounded almost like humming, almost like words. She pressed her ear closer, and someone whispered, "I don't need land to stand on anymore. I carry the house in you." Now, people report new doors in their homes, shifting walls, mirrors that feel warm. The house doesn't need to be visited. It finds you. It grows inside your life unnoticed, rearranging the architecture of your routines until you don't realize the hallway was never that long, or that your closet always turned right, not left. The Wilder house isn't a place anymore. It's a parasite, and it walks behind you, quiet, waiting for the moment you notice it, because the second you do, you've already invited it in. It starts in the throat, not a scratch, not a cough, not even a sore, just friction, a thickness in your voice. As if your words aren't entirely yours anymore. You speak, and somewhere in the echo of it, you hear something else, another tone buried inside the syllables. Lower, slower. Listening to you from the inside. That's what happened to Nathan Holt, and once it started, there was no going back. He hadn't heard of the Wilder house. Not until after. He was a podcaster, true crime, urban legends, cold cases, a skeptic by trade, storyteller by passion. His inbox overflowed with suggestions from fans. Stories about haunted lakes, cursed hotels, rural disappearances. But one message stuck out. No sender, no subject, just a link. A single audio file titled "Don't Listen Too Long." He almost deleted it. But curiosity is its own parasite. He hit play. At first, it was static, loud, messy, unintelligible. Then, beneath the fuzz, a voice, whispered words, stitched together by noise, as though recorded underwater. He couldn't catch the meaning, but the sound of it was like nails dragging through silk. It didn't hurt. It felt right. He listened to the entire 6-minute clip without blinking. The next day, his voice was different. His audience noticed. He read his usual script, but something in the cadence changed. Listeners said his words came slower, more deliberate, like someone else was speaking through him. One woman commented, "He's breathing through the pauses now." That's not Nathan. He brushed it off as fatigue. Then came the recording glitches. Snippets he never said began appearing in his raw audio files. He'd record a 10-minute segment and find an extra 4 seconds at the end. His voice muttering something in a different tone. He didn't remember saying it. The first one said she lives in the vowels. The second you opened your throat, she's climbing out. He tried voice therapy, changed microphones, reinstalled his software, but the audio got worse. Longer phrases began appearing, phrases he'd never written. One night, he played a file back and heard himself say, "I brought the house with me." He didn't remember recording that episode. Worse, his dreams changed. He began waking up mid-sentence, his own voice whispering in his ear, his mouth still moving. The words made no sense, at first just fragments, pieces, until he started writing them down. That's when the phrases aligned. Each one was a coordinate. Each one a sentence lifted from previous interviews. Each one ended the same way, "She speaks better with your mouth." His reflection changed next. He'd be speaking into the mirror while rehearsing, and noticed the timing off. The mouth in the glass moved a split second too slow, but it wasn't lag, it was thought. It was decision. Then, during a live stream, it happened. He spoke halfway through a sentence and stopped. Something else finished it. His voice, lower, smoother, impossibly calm, delivered a sentence that froze his blood. It's louder inside the walls. Silence. Then his eyes rolled back and he collapsed. When he woke in a hospital, they told him it was a seizure, but the nurse wouldn't look him in the eye. She'd heard the recording. In the file, you can hear the exact moment his voice changes, the moment he pauses, the moment something else uses him. And in the silence between words, barely audible, you can hear a third breath. Not his, not human. After his discharge, Nathan went offline. No goodbye episode, no farewell post. His apartment was found abandoned a week later. No signs of struggle, just soundproofing foam peeled from the walls, and the phrase "she's in the larynx" scratched into the wood beneath his recording desk. But here's the part that matters. Fans kept the recordings, archived them, shared them. Then the changes started spreading. Voices began shifting. Podcasters, YouTubers, streamers. They began hesitating between words, repeating certain sounds, mispronouncing their own names. And always, when played backward, there was a whisper. Same phrase. Let me say it. Now sound engineers talk about a new frequency, low, hidden. Something that shouldn't exist in human speech patterns. They call it the Wilder Band. A signal that rides on voice, spreading like a hum beneath conversation. It's not electronic, it's biological. It's resonant. The same way a house breathes through pipes and floorboards, this signal breathes through you. She doesn't need mirrors anymore. She's found a better surface, your voice. So the next time you speak into a microphone, pause. Listen closely. Because if your breath starts echoing wrong, if your words start twisting, repeating, if your voice doesn't come back exactly the same, she's there, and she's learning how to speak without you. There's a story that resurfaces in local forums every few years. Always from someone anonymous, always from someone who swears they're telling the truth. The post goes like this: "I never meant to go in, but I was just following my dog. But the houselet wasn't on the map. It wasn't even on the road. And now I'm still here. I haven't found the front door in 3 days. I'm not sure if I'm the one walking anymore." Most people think it's just a creepypasta, a piece of fiction meant to stir a chill. But if you dig back far enough, into the newspaper clippings, the missing persons logs, the forgotten police records, you'll notice a disturbing pattern. Every few years, someone really does disappear near a place that shouldn't exist. And if they come back, they never remember how they got out. Or worse, they remember too much. The house doesn't let everyone leave. Some are chosen, some are tested, and some, like Jason Mercer, become part of it. Jason was a land surveyor, a rational man. Lived his life by numbers and lines, by concrete and soil. He didn't believe in ghosts or folklore. When he was assigned a contract to map a wooded plot near the old Wilder boundary, he took it as just another paycheck. No hesitation, no fear. That changed the moment he stepped past the tree line and the forest fell silent. Birds vanished, wind died. Even his own footsteps seemed muffled, as if the air thickened just enough to swallow sound. He pulled out his GPS, static. Compass spun. Even the trees looked wrong. Roots twisted like knotted fingers, bark peeling back in long, wet strips. But he pressed on, marking trees, tagging coordinates, until he found the door, just there, in the middle of a clearing. No house, no walls. Just a single white door standing upright in the dirt. His first instinct was to leave. But the handle moved on its own. Clicked once. Slowly creaked open, revealing nothing, just blackness. And somewhere in that void, something breathed in. The wind returned, but backward. Jason blinked, and the house was there. Not assembled, formed. Like it had risen out of memory, not materials. The door led to a hallway that curved impossibly to the left. He turned around to leave. The forest was gone. No sky, no trees. Just more house. He walked back through the door to where he thought the clearing had been, only to find a kitchen. Old. Dusty. A teacup still steaming on the table. The exit was gone. Every step deeper only gave him more house. Rooms that didn't belong in the same era. A living room straight out of the 1950s. A child's nursery with toys that hadn't been manufactured since the 1800s. A cold storage cellar with meat hooks still dripping, yet no smell. No decay. Every wall pulsed faintly, like it was breathing in rhythm with his panic. Jason marked his path with string, chalk, even nails hammered into the floor. The house removed them, he screamed. Punched holes in drywall. Tried breaking a window, only to find brick behind the glass. He tried breaking that, only to discover another room behind it, each one more warped than the last. There were no clocks, no time, only hunger. He found photos once. Black and white portraits nailed to a hallway wall, all of them with the same face, his, different ages, some older, some much older, one a child. And then he found the mirror, at the center of a room that felt too still. It didn't show him. It showed a version of him curled in the fetal position, whispering to himself. A version that slowly stood, turned toward the glass, and began to mouth a sentence. He leaned in, reading the lips. You've already walked this. He stepped back, heart hammering. Another door appeared behind him. He ran, through kitchen after kitchen, bathroom after bathroom. One room had dozens of bathtubs stacked to the ceiling. Another had a grandfather clock inside a fireplace, ticking backwards. Eventually, he began hearing footsteps that weren't his own. They never got closer, they just moved with him, mocking, mirroring. Sometimes, he'd turn suddenly and catch a glimpse of himself, just disappearing around a corner. Once, he caught a full glimpse himself, but starved, sunken, eyes glowing faintly white, crawling on all fours like an animal. It grinned, showed teeth that didn't belong in any human mouth. Jason stopped eating, stopped sleeping. He started writing in the dust, carving words into doors, trying to leave messages for himself, or someone. All of them eventually erased, except one. The house left one message intact, scratched into the wood above a doorframe. The house keeps the parts it likes. He saw it every day after that, no matter where he went. Even after he finally found a window that looked out, the sky was red. The ground stretched too far, with trees that moved like they were watching. The horizon bent upward, circling back into itself. There was no outside, just more inside, pretending to be something else. He found a staircase once, narrow, spiraling forever down. He followed it for hours. At the bottom, a mirror, cracked, and behind the cracks, her, the stitched girl. Mouth trembling, holding out her hand. She said softly, "I waited here until I became a hallway." Jason collapsed. When he woke, he was outside, just outside the tree line. His truck still idling. It had been 21 minutes. He was covered in dust, mud, blood. His fingernails were gone. There were names carved into his forearms. None of them were his. He didn't speak for 2 months. Then one day, he opened his mouth and said, "You can't exit if the house is using you as a door." He disappeared the following week. His apartment was clean, empty, except for a single photograph nailed to the inside of his closet. A hallway, familiar, and in the center of the photo, a figure walking away, dressed like Jason, but slightly off. The elbows bent wrong, the feet were bare, and the shadows stretched the wrong way. Now, others have found the white door in the woods. It never stays in the same place. Sometimes it's behind a gas station. Sometimes it's on the roof of a school. Sometimes it appears at the end of your own hallway at 2:43 a.m. Don't open it. Don't knock. Because if you do, the house won't just take you. It'll keep walking in your skin. And by the time your loved ones notice, you'll be nothing but another hallway inside the house that never ends. There are no clocks in the Wilder house, no ticking, no hands to mark how long you've been wandering. But if you stand still long enough, you'll notice time doesn't pass in the way it should. It loops, folds, peels back on itself. You could blink and lose a year, or close your eyes for what feels like hours and find the dust hasn't even settled. This is how the children got lost. Not because they wandered, but because the house forgot where they were supposed to be. And once it forgot, they never grew up. They just stayed. That's what the boy whispered to Marin Blake when she found him sitting at the end of the hallway, knees pulled to his chest, staring into the dark. His name was Henry. He couldn't remember his last name, only that he'd been trying to find his sister, and the door wouldn't stop moving. He said it had been 2 days. He looked 7. His voice was ancient. Marin had been following the sound of breathing, not hers, not human, ever since she entered the house on a dare. She'd laughed it off. A YouTube challenge. A sponsored stunt. Film herself entering the fabled Wilder house at night, just to prove it was all nonsense. The moment she crossed the threshold, her signal dropped. Her flashlight dimmed, and the front door was gone. She never expected to find children inside. The first one was Henry. He spoke in riddles. Called her the new skin. Said she smelled like the ones before. When she asked where he lived, he pointed at the wall and said, "We sleep behind there when the house doesn't need us." When she asked what that meant, he smiled with chapped lips and said, "You'll hear us when we wake up." Then he vanished. No noise, no motion, just gone. Then came the nursery. It was buried 3 floors down, behind a staircase that coiled like a ribcage. The walls were pale green, peeling in perfect spirals. A mobile spun overhead slowly, though there was no draft. The cribs were empty, at first. But as Marin stepped closer, she heard it breathing. Soft, in unison, from inside the walls. The wallpaper rippled. The cribs rocked gently. Shadows played on the ceiling, too small to be hers. She turned to leave. A child stood at the door. No eyes. Just smooth skin where the socket should have been. A tiny hand outstretched. "They need you to read," he whispered. She backed away. But the cribs were full now. Dozens of children. Silent. Sleeping. As if they'd always been there. As if they were part of the furniture. And then the books appeared. A single shelf, previously empty, now stacked with thick, pulsing journals. She pulled one down. It was warm. The cover breathed. When she opened it, she saw her own handwriting. Entries she had never written, chronicling events she hadn't yet lived. Each page ended with a single phrase in someone else's script. "We're listening." She dropped the book. The children opened their eyes. They didn't blink, didn't cry, just stared at her with empty sockets, as if they saw everything she'd ever been and all she would become. One child spoke, his voice distorted like tape warble. "She made us quiet, so she didn't have to hear us beg." Marin ran. But the house rearranged. Doors moved. Corridors split and curved. She found herself back in the nursery 3 more times, each visit darker than the last. The cribs now rusted. The children older, their limbs too long, their heads tilted too far. She began to lose her voice. At first it was a croak, then silence. Words formed in her mouth but went nowhere. In the mirrors, she could see herself speaking. But no sound came. In the silence, she heard them again. The children, crying now, from behind her own throat. That's when she realized she wasn't just in the house. The house was inside her, its echoes, its whispers. The hollow spaces where the children had been buried, not beneath floorboards, but beneath memory. She found a door marked library. Inside, rows of shelves, not filled with books, but with teeth, baby teeth, labeled, cataloged. Each one had a name attached. Dozens of drawers marked unremembered. She opened one. Inside, her name. A single tooth. Still bloody, still warm. She screamed, or tried to. No sound. The children in the silence didn't want her to speak. They wanted her to listen. From the back of the library came a slow tapping, tiny knuckles against glass. She followed it. A wall of jars, each one filled with fog, floating inside, faces, young, lost, trapped mid-expression, like they'd been caught between fear and recognition. One of them was her, blinking, mouth open, staring, a voice, no age to it, no source, filled the room like rising water. She feeds the house with children who talk too loud. You were always going to be quiet. Marin clawed at the door, but it was gone. Only shelves now, only silence. And behind her, the cribs began to creak again. One by one. That was the last thing caught on her GoPro before the feed cut out the slow rise of small, pale shapes from behind the bars. The video surfaced weeks later. No one knew who uploaded it. The channel name was a string of numbers, coordinates that led to the Wilder property. The final frame of the video, a new crib, fresh wood, a single name carved into the realm Aaron. And if you play the audio in reverse, you can hear a lullaby being hummed in a chorus of broken voices, children rising in unison to whisper the last line, "You'll sleep when she forgets you." But she never forgets. She collects. It's said that every house has a memory. The way floorboards creak under the weight of lost footsteps. The lingering scent of perfume long faded. The scratch marks left behind by things never quite seen. But the Wilder house doesn't just remember. It records. Every breath, every movement. Every scream that's ever echoed through its walls. It collects them, binds them, plays them back like a haunting it rewrites on loop. The worst part isn't that the house remembers you. It's that it remembers you wrong. It began with Alina and Matthew Price, a couple who bought the story of the house before the house had a chance to buy them. They were paranormal investigators. Not the thrill-seeking, jump-scare-chasing, flashlight-toting kind, but the serious ones, EMF meters, geophones, infrared scanners, the works. They were methodical, careful, logical. They believed everything could be explained if you knew what to look for. They should have known better. They entered through what used to be the front. The doorway half collapsed, vines growing over the frame, sagging beams casting jagged shadows. For hours, nothing happened. Just dust and decay, the smell of wet wood and old secrets. Elena set up cameras while Matthew placed audio triggers. They marked every doorway with chalk, every wall with light, sensitive tape. Then they found the room. It didn't appear until the third circuit of the second floor. A door that hadn't been there before, wedged between two others like it had grown in the last 10 minutes. No handle. Just a faint warmth coming off the wood like a heartbeat. They didn't speak as they pushed it open. The room was small, empty, no windows. Just a chair in the center, turned to face a wall covered floor to ceiling in photographs. Dozens, hundreds, all black and white, all framed in thick, tarnished silver. And every single one was of them. Alina and Matthew, but not as they were now. Some photos showed them laughing in places they'd never been. Others showed them older, younger, dead. One photo showed Alina in a wedding dress, but not the one she'd worn. Another showed Matthew standing in front of a burning building, blood dripping from his hands. None of the pictures had ever been taken. They weren't memories. They were suggestions. They turned to leave. The door was gone, and then the room changed. The walls pulsed. The photographs began to twitch, eyes blinking, mouths opening. The chair scraped backward slightly. The light dimmed until all that remained was the glow from the silver frames. And then the voices started. Not whispers, replays. The room began spitting back pieces of conversations Elena and Matthew had never had. Arguments, confessions, lies. I saw you watching her. Don't lie to me, not in this house. You brought her here, didn't you? Matthew swore he never said those things. Elena wasn't so sure. The room fed on doubt. The photos changed again, now showing moments that hadn't happened yet. Alina standing alone, Matthew with his back turned. A new image every few seconds, each one more horrifying than the last. One photo showed Alina's mouth wide open in a scream, but no eyes. Another showed Matthew kneeling, head bent, something looming behind him. Something with hands too long and a face made of teeth. And then, in the corner of the room, a new door appeared. Red, no knob, just a keyhole, and hanging beside it on a rusted hook, 2 keys. One gold, one black. A choice. The voices screamed louder, overlapping into a storm of guilt and grief. Elena grabbed the gold key. Matthew reached for the black. The room went silent. The keyhole accepted both. The door opened. But what was on the other side wasn't a hallway. It was another room. Identical. Same chair. Same photos. But now the images were blurry, melting, stretched like wet paint on glass. The photos began to drip. Each drop landed with a metallic hiss. The chair in the center was now occupied by a figure with its back turned, hands bound behind the arms of the chair. It wore Elena's face, but its mouth was missing. And when she reached out toward it, the photographs exploded off the walls like shattered mirrors, revealing eyes behind them, watching, judging, remembering. She tried to scream, but her voice didn't work. She reached for Matthew. He was gone, vanished. The room now held only her, the bound version of herself, and a reflection in the melting photo, glass that showed neither of them had moved, just multiplied. The house had remembered them both so many times. It no longer knew which versions to keep. That's when the lights went out. The camera footage recovered later from their equipment, sent automatically to a cloud before the systems fried. Shows Alina and Matthew arguing inside the room. Shows them leaving. Shows them re-entering again hours later. Shows them dying 3 different times, each recording slightly different. In one, Alina collapses. In another, Matthew stabs himself. In the third, there's no one in the room at all. Just the chair spinning slowly and the photographs beginning to rearrange. Now, if you visit the Wilder house, if you somehow manage to find that room again, you might see new photographs on the wall, ones that don't belong to you. Yet, images of you reading this, sitting alone, staring at a screen, and in one photo, maybe you're looking into a mirror, and your reflection isn't looking back. Because the house doesn't forget, it replays. And when it chooses you, it doesn't just trap your body, it traps every possible version of who you were and could have been. All inside the room that remembers you wrong. They say if you press your ear to the floor in the Wilder house and stay very, very still, you'll hear something breathing, not beneath the boards, but between them. A slow, shuddering inhale like wood stretching under weight it shouldn't be carrying. Some think it's just the house settling. Others know better. They say it's her. The girl. The stitched one. They say she was buried alive somewhere beneath the bones of the house, and the house learned to breathe with her lungs. Lena Kershaw didn't go to the Wilder house by choice. She inherited it from a great uncle she'd never met, whose name was scratched off most records, but still lingered in the whispered warnings of elderly neighbors. The will came with a single condition: stay in the house for 7 nights alone, and it's hers. The land, the house, everything. She laughed when she read it, thought it was the plot of a bad horror film. A lawyer assured her it was real. The property taxes were paid. The deed was valid. She only needed to sign and survive. The first night was cold, dead quiet. No creaks, no groans, just dust and silence. She lit candles to make it feel less dead, wandered the rooms with her phone flashlight, half expecting something dramatic. But nothing happened. Until 2:43 a.m., a soft, rhythmic knock from beneath the floor. Not on the floor. Under it, she froze. It wasn't wind. It wasn't pipes. It was too intentional. 3 slow knocks, a pause, then 4 knocks, faster. Then silence. She whispered, "Hello." The floor responded, with a whisper back. Not words, just breath. Something waiting for hers to finish before it exhaled. The timing was exact, like it was mimicking her, copying her breath so it could learn it. She didn't sleep that night. By morning, the knocking stopped. She searched the house for signs of vermin, pipes, speakers, anything. Nothing explained it. The cellar was dry, the joists solid. The house was too old to hide speakers. Still, she wrote it off. First night nerves. Suggestion. She made coffee. Went about her day. Second night, it started again. Same time, 2:43 a.m. This time the breathing escalated. It began to hum. Not a melody, just a flat note, low and deep, coming from below the floorboards. And this time she felt it, not in her ears, but in her bones. Her legs ached. Her ribs tightened. The house was vibrating, ever so slightly, as if it were trying to tune her. She backed away from the center of the room. The humming followed her. Under each footstep, she felt it shadow her movements like a second skin stitched underneath the wood. She ran upstairs. The vibration faded. The hum silenced. But as she stood there catching her breath, she heard something even worse. The floorboards in her bedroom whispering her name. Not loudly, not cruelly, soft, affectionate, like someone missing her. She fled the house that night, drove into town, and checked into a motel. Told herself she'd go back in the morning, collect her things, and be done with it. The inheritance could rot. No house was worth this. But the next morning, her car wouldn't start. The motel staff said she never checked in. Her credit cards were declined. Her phone had only one number in its call log, herself. And the message read, "Come back. You left her awake." She returned to the house on foot. It was waiting. Not empty anymore. The wallpaper now bore impressions, like someone had pressed their face into it from the inside. The floor creaked with her name every third step. She avoided stepping on certain boards, but it didn't matter. The house followed through sound, not sight. On the third night, she recorded the noises. When she played them back, she heard something terrifying. The whispers weren't just saying her name. They were asking questions. Why did you lock the door? Where did you bury me? Do you still love me? She had no answers, no memory of this place, no reason for this madness. But the house insisted, and on the fourth night, she understood why. She had been there before, not in this lifetime, but in one of the many the house remembered for her. A splinter pierced her foot while walking barefoot across the parlor floor. As she pulled it out, and blood dripped onto the wood, and the floorboards drank it, soaked it in like parched lips. The humming grew louder, and a panel near the hearth popped open. Inside was a narrow crawl space, black, dry, smelling of lilacs and formaldehyde. She crawled in, because of course she did. The moment she did, she saw them. 'Em. 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 ' woven through the beams, tucked into the insulation, curled like roots, and in the far corner, a face, sewn shut, but smiling, her face, staring back at her with an expression that said, "Finally, you remember." Lena screamed, backed out, slammed the panel shut. But the humming never stopped again. It followed her upstairs, into her dreams, into her voice. She tried to speak, and the floorboards echoed her words before she finished them. Mocking, repeating, altering. The floor became a mouth, and it wanted her voice. On the seventh night, the floor opened completely. Boards slid back like ribs. Beneath them, a pit of mouths, all smiling, all whispering her name with perfect imitation. She stood at the edge, shaking. And the floor whispered, "Finish the breath you started." She jumped. No one has seen Lena since. But the house has changed. New voices now echo under the floor. Some say if you stand quietly in the Wilder house at 2:43 a.m., you'll hear her down there. Not screaming, laughing, because she remembers now. And remembering means belonging. The house only breathes when someone forgets. And now that she remembers, she'll never let you go. There are mirrors, and then there are reflections. Most people think they're the same. They think a mirror simply reflects back what's in front of it. But that's not true, not in the Wilder house. In that place, a mirror is not glass and silver and frame. It's a mouth, a trapdoor to somewhere just left of real. It doesn't show what you are. It shows what the house wants you to be. And when it's hungry enough, it makes you that version, whether you like it or not. Nico Ramirez was a videographer. He had no interest in haunted lore or the supernatural. His business was light, angles, filters. He made artists look flawless and architecture seem ethereal. When a fringe magazine offered him $5,000 to shoot interiors of the Wilder house for a dark Americana spread, he didn't even blink. Money's money. He figured if ghosts were real, they'd at least know how to stay out of frame. But the house was expecting him. He stepped through the collapsed entryway with 3 cameras, 2 stabilizers, a drone, and a head full of doubt. For the first hour, things were strangely normal, dusty, decrepit, but stable. Every shot he took was golden. The late afternoon light hit the banisters like something out of a Gothic painting. Even the mold on the ceiling had a weird kind of symmetry. Then, just before sunset, he found the mirror. It wasn't in a room. It stood alone in the middle of the hallway on the 3rd floor. Frame warped like it had been half, melted and refrozen in panic. There was no dust on it. No cracks. No grime. It shone like it had just been cleaned. The only pristine surface in the entire house. He pointed his camera at it. Nothing showed up in the lens. He panned back. The hallway, clear. The mirror, still there. He pointed again. Still nothing. When he glanced into the mirror himself, his heart stopped. It didn't reflect him. Not directly. It reflected a version of the hallway, but the lights were dimmer, the walls more bloated, as if water logged. His own figure stood there, still unmoving, staring straight at him. Except the reflection smiled. He didn't. He backed away. The smile grew. Then the reflection raised its hand and waved. That was when he dropped the camera. When he picked it up again, it was recording. Playback showed something impossible. His face twisted, pulled tight, stretched, grinning from ear to ear as though his skin had been tautened by hooks. He hadn't looked like that. Not even close. He stopped the recording. Suddenly, all his previous footage, his perfect moody interior shots, was gone, replaced by still frames of him, not just standing, but moving, doing things he hadn't done. Pacing, laughing, bleeding, screaming. One clip showed him kneeling in front of the mirror, tearing strips from his own face and pressing them to the glass like offerings. He checked his skin. It was intact. For now. That night, he couldn't leave. Every exit vanished. Doors led to staircases. Staircases led to closets. Closets led to the mirror again. Always the mirror. Always that reflection, grinning wider with each return, as if slowly swallowing a joke only it understood. At 2:43 a.m., his reflection spoke. The mouth moved. No sound came. So Nico moved closer, heart pounding, sweat chilling down his back. As he got within inches of the glass, he could feel heat, wet, unnatural heat, coming from the other side. The reflection mouthed words again. This time, Nico understood you already switched. He staggered back. His own handprint was on the inside of the glass. Not left by him, waiting for him. Then came the pain. Not in his body, but his memory. It began to rot. Names, places, his mother's voice, his dog's bark. Gone. Just holes punched in his thoughts, filled instead with false recollections, crawling through a hallway made of teeth. Eating photographs to remember who he was. Standing in front of the mirror while someone else wore his body, he screamed into the glass. The reflection didn't. It smiled. Then raised a finger, pointed at him, then pointed down. He looked. The floorboards under his feet were gone. Only mirror. He fell into himself. The camera was found weeks later by a pair of urban explorers. Battery long dead, SD card corroded. Only one image survived, a single still of Nico, staring directly into the lens, one eye missing, the other filled with static. Behind him stood an infinite hallway of mirrors, each one showing a different version of him, all in different poses. All smiling, except one. The last one, it wasn't smiling. It had its hands pressed to the glass, mouth open in a silent scream, eyes wide with terror. That one, they say, is the real Nico, still trapped inside the reflection, watching, begging. But the house doesn't give back what it steals. It leaves something close enough to pass. Now, if you see a mirror in your home that you don't remember hanging, and your reflection seems just a beat too slow, don't move too fast. Don't shout. Don't blink, because it's waiting for you to slip, to match it. And once you do, it switches. No creak, no crack, no blood, just a grin. And silence. It began with a voice. A soft, crawling whisper that didn't seem to come from a mouth or throat or lungs, but from the air itself, woven into dust motes, folded in wood grain, echoing through cracks. A whisper that didn't wait to be heard. It followed. It moved. It walked. Harriet Sloan was a night custodian, hired under a false name by a preservation group that wanted photos of the inside of the Wilder house. They claimed it was part of an architectural survey. Mid-century resurrection, they called it. She didn't know it was a lot. She didn't know they'd already lost 2 others before her. She didn't even know what the Wilder house was. She just knew she needed the money. The first time she heard the whisper, she assumed it was the wind. The house was ancient, after all, bloated with age and secrets, every board soaked in silence. But this wind had rhythm. It murmured syllables. Not words, pieces of words. Like someone halfway through remembering a language. She swept the main hall. The whisper circled her. She cleaned the old chandelier. It rose into the ceiling beams. She tried humming to drown it out. The whisper hummed with her. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was presence. It never got loud. Never shouted. That would have been easier. It stayed low, patient, almost tender. Like it had waited years to be noticed. And now that it had her attention, it wanted to earn her. Not rush. Just be close. By the 3rd night it began calling her name. Not Harriet, but Little Hare. A nickname only one person had ever used. Her grandfather, long dead, long buried. She hadn't heard it in decades. Yet the voice got it exactly right. Not just the name, the tone, the drawl, the sorrow tucked beneath it. She didn't run. She listened. On the 4th night, it asked her to follow. Not in words, in breath, in sound. The way the wind moved through the hall. The way the boards creaked in succession, pulling her like breadcrumbs. She followed without realizing. Down into the lower halls, through a door that hadn't been opened before. Into the room with no ceiling. Just open blackness above. There was a single chair, and above it, hanging in mid-air, a mouth. No face, no body. Just lips, wide and cracked, floating in the dark, whispering still. You've heard me since birth, Little Hare. You just forgot how to answer. Harriet trembled. The whisper didn't stop. It spoke memories she didn't know she still carried. Her mother crying behind the garage, her childhood dog's last breath, the taste of snow in 1984, moments too small for anyone to know, yet the voice remembered them perfectly. It wasn't guessing, it had been there. Always. And it asked her again, "Will you walk with me?" She said yes, because when something remembers you better than the world ever did, it's hard to say no. The house changed after that. She began seeing things in the edges of doors, shadows walking just behind her reflection. The lights flickered in conversation, dimming and rising with her thoughts. Her own breath echoed back with different timing. Her voice began to carry a second tone, one that answered before she finished speaking. The whisper wasn't outside her anymore. It was inside now, wearing her tongue. By the sixth night, she no longer walked on her own. The whisper moved her, guided her hands to write names she'd never heard, guided her feet to rooms that didn't exist until she stepped through. She began dreaming of hallways that dripped with skin, doorways shaped like jaws, ceilings that blinked. She woke with bruises in the shape of fingers on her shoulders. But her own fingers couldn't make that grip. Then came the moment she saw herself, not in a mirror, but in the hallway, standing, still, watching same face, same eyes, same hair, but the smile wasn't hers. The whisper stood inside the copy, and finally it spoke aloud, "Thank you, little hair. I needed a body." She ran. But the house didn't fight her. It let her flee, because the whisper no longer needed to haunt her. It had her voice, and now it could walk on its own. Days later, another custodian arrived. Said she'd taken the job after hearing Harriet had vanished. The preservation group claimed they never hired anyone. The records were clean. No one named Harriet Sloan had ever signed the contract. But the Wilder house had changed again. Now, if you visit at night and listen, truly listen, you might hear two sets of footsteps pacing the upper floors, one quick, one slow. And if you stand in the foyer long enough, the house might speak, not in moans, not in groans, but in a whisper just behind your ear, saying you already answered. You just don't remember. And then you'll hear it walking away, with your footsteps. In every house, there's a room you forget about until you need it. A spare room. A storage space. Something you pass by without much thought. The Wilder house uses that instinct like bait. It adds rooms when you're not looking, tucks them into corners, builds them into places where memory should say, "There was never a door there." And once you step inside, it makes sure you forget you ever wanted to leave. Avery Dill wasn't easily rattled. As a paranormal researcher, she dealt with her fair share of creaking attics and self-closing doors. She didn't believe in curses, only architecture. To her, the house was just wood and old air, and stories passed around like campfire myths. But myths, she knew, often had a root in something real. So when she heard about the guest room that shows up after sunset, she wanted to find it. Not to fear it, to understand it. She arrived at 6:48 p.m. Armed with a floor plan drawn from city records, she mapped every room meticulously. The house had 16 recorded rooms. She found 17. One extra, tucked behind a hallway that should have ended in a brick wall. A white door, brass knob. No dust on the hinges. Her flashlight flickered when it hit the doorknob, just once, enough to register. Inside was the most normal room in the house. Bright yellow wallpaper, slightly faded, a twin bed with a knitted afghan, lace curtains, a vanity desk. It felt harmless, out of place. Like a grandmother's room dropped in the middle of a haunted structure. She walked in slowly, camera filming, her breath clouding just a bit from a cold draft that had no source. The moment she stepped in, the door clicked shut behind her. She didn't panic. She checked her gear, but something was wrong with the footage. The video showed her entering the room again, and again, and again, from different angles. Each clip showed her stepping through the door, pausing, smiling like she knew the room, like she belonged there. But she'd only just entered once. When she reached to open the door and leave, she saw something deeply wrong. There were now 2 beds. Identical. Same Afghan. Same pillow fold. And as she watched, the second bed's blanket shifted, like someone rolled over in their sleep. She stepped back. Her elbow hit the vanity, knocking over the mirror. It didn't break. It didn't reflect her. Instead, it showed her standing in the bed, lying still, eyes open, mouth whispering something she couldn't hear. But the version in the mirror blinked, and the real her felt it. The connection was instant. Sudden, sickening. She tried to speak, but her voice failed. Only a gasp escaped her throat. She reached up instinctively, and in the mirror, the other her reached down, mimicking the motion with perfect anticipation. Avery backed into the corner. The wallpaper pulsed. The floor dipped like it was breathing beneath her feet. The vanity lights began to flicker, with the heartbeat rhythm the house always loved. Then came the knock, not on the door, from inside the second bed, slow, hollow, like knuckles rapping on the underside of skin. She leaned forward. The covers of the second bed began to rise. 1 inch, 2. A hand emerged, not decomposed, not monstrous. Hers, exactly hers. Every wrinkle, every mark. It reached toward the real Avery like it wanted help, then twisted backward with a snap, bones cracking, fingers contorting into impossible angles. The blanket peeled back further to reveal a face, her face, but smiling too wide. Lips split open as it rasped it. I was the guest last time. You're hosting now. Avery lunged for the door. It opened instantly. No resistance. The hallway was different now, longer, darker, and the floor plan was useless. Every turn led her back to the guest room, even when she walked in the opposite direction. And each time she returned, the guest bed had a new shape beneath the covers, a new version of her, each one older, more decayed, until the 7th visit, when the bed was empty, and she saw the camera lying on the vanity, blinking red. Footage showed someone else holding it. Another her, saying goodbye into the lens, then walking out of frame. No one's seen Avery Dills since, but the guest room reappears for some, a door that wasn't there yesterday. It always looks inviting, safe, harmless, like a space meant for you. And once you enter, the bed is already warm, because someone else left it for you. Someone who once thought the house couldn't trick them. But the Wilder house never tricks. It waits. And when it needs a new host, it offers you a room, and hopes you won't notice it already has your name stitched into the pillow. They called him the caretaker, though no one could recall when he was hired. No staff records, no salary logs, just the quiet acceptance that he was always there, shuffling through the Wilder house in soft, sweeping arcs, pushing a warped broom made of ashwood and wary black bristles. His name was Gregory Bell, and long before the Wilder house became the vortex it is now, he lived within its ribs, breathing in its rot, listening to its shifting bones like they were sermon. But his secret, the one not even the house understood at first, was this: Gregory didn't eat food. Gregory ate dust. He said it had memories. That every speck carried a fragment of someone, of what they left behind, or what they feared. And the Wilder house? It had centuries of dust, centuries of forgotten breaths, flaked off skin, grief too heavy to carry. Gregory ate it all. Slowly, patiently, one sweep at a time. He'd gather the gray veil from beneath the beds, from behind the baseboards, from the hidden crawl spaces that whispered and blinked when no one watched. He'd roll the dust between his fingers, nod, and press it to his lips. At first, he was ignored. Visitors dismissed him as part of the background, harmless. Just a muttering old man with crusted lips and hollow eyes, mumbling nonsense about hearing the house chew. He never bothered anyone, never spoke unless spoken to. But if you did talk to him, if you really listened, he'd ask you the same question every time. Do you know what your shadow leaves behind? No one ever answered. Not properly, because they didn't know. But Gregory did, and that's what made him dangerous. It was the interns who noticed first. the ones cataloging the new anomalies. After weeks of surveillance footage, they realized that Gregory never walked the same path twice. His movements weren't random, they were deliberate. Like he was sweeping in a pattern, a message. When they mapped it, connecting each point where Gregory lingered, each corner he scrubbed a little too clean, a symbol emerged. Not language, not runes, teeth, a jaw-shaped glyph spiraling across the entire first floor of the Welder house, one so large you could only see it from the blueprint. He'd been feeding the house, or maybe feeding something else inside it. The dust, they realized, wasn't being collected. It was being served. Then came the night he started speaking in voices that weren't his. On a routine sweep of the grand staircase, Gregory began reciting the final words of people who had disappeared in the house. Verbatim, in their own intonation, their accents, their breath. One voice was shrill and terrified, "She's under the skin. She never left the well." Another, calm. "Brittle, tell my mother I didn't mean to find the room." Gregory never broke stride. He just swept and spoke and smiled, until he collapsed. They found him in the main parlor, curled into the ash he had once swept, his mouth packed full of dust, so thick it had fused his teeth together. His eyes were wide open, still blinking, still tracking movement, but his body, stiff, cold, as if something had climbed inside him and locked him in. They tried to move him. He crumbled, literally, collapsed into a pile of pale, fibrous gray, like someone had vacuumed out the man and left only what he had eaten. But the dust didn't fall apart like normal dust. It held its shape, vaguely humanoid, arms bent, legs curled, a smear of a face, watching, and then it stood up, not entirely, just the shape of it. The suggestion of Gregory Bell, reassembled from the residue of everyone else's pain. It moved like paper caught in wind, whispered without sound. And it walked right back to the broom, picked it up with fingers that weren't real anymore, and continued sweeping. No one interfered again. Now, the house stays silent when Gregory passes. The floorboards don't creak. The walls don't breathe. Even the mirrors go still, because something about him, the dust of him, has power. Not power like magic, power like familiarity, as if the house sees him not as an intruder, but as a part of itself. And he's still asking that question, still whispering to those who dare look him in his faded, flaky face, "Do you know what your shadow leaves behind?" No one does. But if you stay too long, if you linger in the forgotten rooms, or breathe too deep in the chapel with no ceiling, you'll feel it. A dryness in your throat, a weight in your lungs, like something crawling up your windpipe to collect you. You cough, but nothing comes out, except dust. And if Gregory Bell is near, you might see him pause mid-sweep and smile, because the house fed him your fear, and your shadow just left behind a new flavor. One he hasn't tasted in a very, very long time. The Wilder house doesn't laugh, it smiles, always smiling, always almost human, especially in the attic. That's where it hides its worst jokes. The kind no one hears without going a little quiet afterward. You see, the attic was never part of the blueprint. Not officially. Ask any contractor, any town record. The house ends at the second floor. But if you take the west stairwell, the one that curves like a corkscrew and hums in low tones when your feet touch it, there's another flight of stairs waiting. Unlit. Unmarked. Wood swollen with old blood and secrets so old they've gone still. Up there, something smiles without lips, and it's been waiting for you to hear it. Darren Leeds wasn't looking for horror. He was looking for inheritance. His grandmother had lived in a home adjacent to the Wilder property, and when she passed, he discovered she'd left him an envelope, yellowed, brittle, sealed with wax. Inside was a key. No note, no explanation. Just the key and an address that shouldn't have existed anymore. But the lock still worked, and the door still opened. And Darren, with his camera phone, his curiosity, and his need to believe it was all superstition, stepped inside. The attic wasn't hard to find. It was heard before it was seen. From the moment he entered the house, there was a slow creaking above. Back and forth, like an old chair rocking on its own. At first, he assumed it was the wind, a trick of the frame. But the rhythm never faltered. It didn't follow gusts, it didn't pause. It was intentional, constant, like someone with all the time in the world was just rocking, waiting, and smiling. He climbed the west stairwell out of spite, to prove to himself that the sound was just acoustics, that there was nothing upstairs, that ghosts don't rock in chairs. But as he rose, the sound got louder, not just in his ears, but in his teeth. It vibrated through the fillings in his molars. It made his gums ache. By the time he reached the top step, he was already bleeding from the corners of his mouth, though he didn't know it yet. The attic door was a hatch. He pushed it open. Darkness. The kind that had depth, shape, like cloth hanging over eyes that didn't want to see. He raised his phone's flashlight. The rocking stopped. He stepped up, and there it was, a rocking chair in the middle of the attic, its wood worn to a polish. Empty, or so it looked. But the chair kept rocking, and behind it, just barely visible in the weak light, something stood, a shape, too tall, too narrow. Its spine bent backward like a coat rack half collapsed, and its smile. Not on a face, not between cheeks. The smile hung across its entire head, jawless, gumless. Just teeth strung like pearls from temple to temple, always showing, never blinking. Darren froze. The thing didn't move. Didn't speak. It just smiled. Then the rocking chair stopped, and that was worse, because silence in the Wilder attic means attention. The figure stepped forward. Its knees didn't bend. Its feet didn't lift. It glided, noiselessly, as if held up by strings just out of sight. Its arms hung limp, fingers trailing the floor like roots dragging through soil, and the smile grew. Darren turned to run, but the hatch had closed. He hadn't heard it shut. He hadn't felt the door move. It was just gone. He screamed, and the thing in the attic mimicked it. Perfectly, not echoed, copied. Its jaw split open with a crack that split the air like lightning, revealing layers beneath more teeth. Rose, spinning like gears. And inside that cavern, a second face, his own, screaming back at him. He dropped his phone. The light blinked once. Then darkness again. The neighbors reported the noise later. A series of sharp, low thuds, like furniture being thrown against the walls. Then a final sound, so high, pitched it shattered a window across the street. No one found Darren. But his phone did reconnect weeks later. It uploaded exactly one file to his cloud. A 15-second video. First 3 seconds blackness. Then light flickers on, revealing Darren's terrified face. He's standing behind the camera, but he's also in front of it, smiling. The last frame is static, overlaid with a whisper. When slowed and reversed, the whisper is clear. If you smile wide enough, no one can hear the screaming. Now, people claim the attic is still there. Sometimes when you're in the Wilder house, you'll hear rocking above you, even if you're on the top floor. Sometimes you'll feel your lips twitching, stretching, even when you're not amused. And sometimes you'll climb a stair that shouldn't exist and find yourself face to face with a shape that smiles too early, too wide, too much. Don't smile back. Not ever. Because that thing in the attic, it doesn't want to kill you. It wants to wear you. And it always starts with the teeth. Some doors are built to keep things out. Others, to keep things in. But there's one door in the Wilder house that doesn't care which side you're on. It doesn't lock. It doesn't latch. It doesn't even shut fully. It just hangs there, half open, forever stuck in the middle of some choice you didn't realize you'd made. And once you see it, really see it, you can't unsee it. You'll find it again in every place you go. Not the door itself, but the space behind it. Because the truth is, the door isn't a doorway. It's an invitation. And someone, or something, on the other side is still waiting for an answer. Caleb Anders first saw it when he was 6. It was in the basement of his grandmother's house, long before anyone had ever mentioned the Welder property. He wandered down into the dark with a toy flashlight, chasing the soft whimper of a cat that didn't exist. The light flickered, and there it was, a door tucked behind the furnace, cracked open just enough to see a sliver of warm light leaking out. He remembered reaching for it, his fingers barely brushing the edge, when his grandmother yanked him back by the collar. She never explained why, only said, "You never touch the door that doesn't close." Years later, after a failed marriage, a fractured ankle, and a bankruptcy that left him raw and wandering, Caleb found himself in a crumbling town with no family left, no plan, and one last thing to his name: a small, handwritten note he'd found in a forgotten coat pocket, a sketch of a house, the Wilder house, and scribbled underneath, in his own childhood handwriting, "The door that doesn't close is here." He didn't remember writing it. He didn't remember ever seeing the house. But when he arrived, he felt something settle in his chest, like lungs finally finding old air again. He stepped inside, and the house let him. No resistance. It wanted him there. He didn't find the door on the first night, or the second. It waited until he stopped looking. Only when he gave in, sat on the cracked tile floor, his back against the sagging wall, whispering into the stale air, "Just show me why I'm here," did it appear. Not with a sound, not with motion, just presence. He looked up, and there it was. A door, beige and plain, with rusted hinges and no knob, half open, hanging like a crooked picture. The space behind it glowed with soft amber, like an old lamp trapped in fog. He crawled to it, peered through, and he saw his old bedroom, not in memory, exactly as it had been. Even the toy car with the missing wheel sat near the vent. But it wasn't right. The walls breathed. The bed swayed slightly, like it had lungs. And on the ceiling, drawn in faint chalk, was a phrase repeated over and over: "I already let you in." Caleb stepped back. The door didn't budge, didn't open more, didn't close, just waited. That night, he dreamed of the door, of something crouched behind it, grinning without shape, speaking in his father's voice, not words. Just the tone, that disappointed sigh. He woke up with dust packed under his fingernails. Though he'd slept on concrete, his knees ached like he'd been kneeling for hours. The door followed him. Even when he tried to leave the room, it was there. Now on the other side of the hallway, now embedded in the ceiling, now inside the reflection of the broken mirror, tilted just so. Every version still half open, still offering a glimpse of something familiar, not pleasant, recognizable, but corrupted, and always with that light, amber, warm, too warm, like the color of old teeth. On the third night, Caleb finally spoke to it. "Why me?" And the door answered, not with speech, but with air. A breath pushed through the gap. Warm, damp, grateful, as if something had been holding its breath for years and could finally exhale. Then came the voice, "Because you almost opened me once." The breath turned cold, full, like rotted cedar and spoiled milk. The space behind the door expanded. He could see it now, not a room, but a corridor of doors, each one slightly ajar, each leading to a variation of a past that could have happened. One showed him never leaving home. Another showed him burying someone. He didn't know who, just that he was weeping in a suit. A third showed him on a hospital bed, laughing at something only he could see. And the one furthest down showed him standing in this house, staring at the very same door, whispering, "I let it in." He ran, or thought he did. Every door he passed was that door. Every corner turned led him right back. Every breath he took echoed, not just as sound, but as reply. He was talking to himself now, arguing with different versions of himself, each on the other side of their own slightly opened door, each trying to convince the other that they were real. He never escaped, not in the way people understand. Eventually, the house opened for someone else. A group of documentarians, armed with drones and arrogance. They found a note carved into the wall near the cellar stairs, Words etched over days with broken fingernails: never trust a door that waits. If it wanted to close, it would have, but it knows you'll finish the job. No one's found Caleb. But sometimes, visitors to the Wilder house swear they hear breathing behind the doors that shouldn't exist. They say the gaps grow wider when you turn away, that if you lean too close, you'll hear your own voice coming from the other side, calmer, more confident, and begging, "Let me out. Just for a minute. Just open it the rest of the way." And if you do, you're the new crack in the wall, the next door that won't close. And someone else, someday, will come looking for you, just like you once did. All it takes is curiosity, and a door slightly ajar. There's a room in the Wilder house where time doesn't pass, it rewinds. Not all at once, not fast, just slowly enough for you to notice. It begins with the clock. A simple wall piece, wooden frame, tarnished brass hands, a cracked glass face. It ticks like any other, until it doesn't, until it pauses, shudders, then starts counting down. But it's not the seconds that change, it's you. Eliza Munro wasn't a thrill seeker. She was a historian, obsessed with the mechanics of forgotten timepieces. When word reached her of a lost clockmaker's sanctuary buried inside the Wilder house, she thought it was an exaggeration. A myth, maybe. Still, her interest got the better of her. She came with blueprints, flashlights, and the belief that everything had a reason, even ghosts. She found the room on the 4th floor, tucked behind what used to be a servant's corridor. The wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips, revealing old wood paneling beneath. Dust clung to the air like fog, and there it was, hung perfectly on the wall, a clock that didn't match any era in the house. Baroque carvings, numbers etched in reverse, a second hand that ticked forward, but minute and hour hands that slowly crawled back. She checked her watch, sensed it, waited. The longer she stood there, the more her watch lost time. By midnight, she was 5 minutes behind. By 3:00 a.m., her battery drained, dead, but the room was warmer, brighter, cleaner, and the clock, still counting backward, was now chiming once every 47 seconds. Eliza began to feel strange. Not sick, younger. Her joints stopped aching. Her fingers, once curled from years of writing, felt loose again. Her vision sharpened. Her scalp tingled like hair was growing in places it had thinned. She looked in the cracked mirror mounted on the opposite wall. She was younger. Maybe by 5, maybe 10 years. She didn't smile. Because the worst part, she recognized this version of herself. And it wasn't a good one. The younger Eliza, the one standing before her, was reckless, arrogant, cold. A version who'd made decisions that haunted her into her 30s. And now, as the clock ticked backwards again, she felt it all sliding into place. Thoughts she hadn't had in years resurfaced. The names of people she'd left behind returned, stinging like wasp bites. The guilt she'd buried clawed its way back up. Each tick of the clock wasn't just wending her body back, it was dragging her choices with it. She tried to leave. But the hallway was wrong now. Where there had been rot, there was polish. Where the wallpaper had curled, it now shone gold. The house itself was turning back with her. Every door she opened led her to a past she hoped she'd buried. Her childhood bedroom, her college dorm, her first apartment, with the broken faucet and the red-lipped ghost who cried from the bathtub. And through it all, the same clock hung in every space, always counting backward, always ticking, faster now. At 4:27 a.m., Eliza stood in a room that wasn't hers, but it felt familiar. The crib in the corner, the mobile of stars overhead. She backed into the hallway and slammed the door shut before she saw what lay in the crib. She couldn't face it, couldn't bear the idea that the house might rewind her past birth. She sprinted through corridors that had reshaped themselves into memories. Her grandmother's basement, her mother's staircase, the hallway where she once slapped a friend and never apologized. The doors breathed, the carpet pulsed, and the ticking turned into a heartbeat. It no longer counted hours, It counted choices. All of them. And with each step, the weight of her memory shifted, details rearranged, truths bent. Her first heartbreak no longer hurt the same. It was distant, muddy, like watching someone else cry through glass. Her accomplishments dulled. Her losses became whispers. Her identity unraveled. The Wilder house was peeling her back, unmaking her. Not through force, but through familiarity. By the time dawn scraped its gray light across the windows, she stood at the edge of a room she didn't remember building. Inside, the clock rested on the floor, still ticking. Now a soft, wet sound. Its hands stopped at a moment she didn't recognize. Then it chimed once, flat, distorted, and went still. Eliza woke outside the house, face down in mud, mouth filled with water, no clock, no memory of how she left. But she was younger. Not by decades, but definitely by years, and her name felt foreign in her mouth. She tried to say it. Couldn't. Only one word would come. Again. Now, she roams city libraries, forgotten churches, decaying hotels. Anywhere time seems thin, looking for the clock, trying to find the room. But the house doesn't repeat gifts, it waits, and waits, until someone else walks in, sees the backward clock, thinks it's just broken, and stands too long inside the room while their regrets drip off the walls, reshaping the world into something more honest. Not better, not kinder, just true. The kind of truth only time dares to show you when it runs in reverse. There's a hallway in the Wilder house lined with portraits that no one remembers painting. Faces you don't recognize. Names you've never heard. Some are cracked and darkened by soot, others pristine like they were hung just yesterday. But there's one that's different. One that's never quite in the same place twice. You'll see it over the staircase, then again near the attic door, then again behind a bookcase that's never opened before. It's not the way it moves that unsettles you. It's the way the eyes follow you, not with suspicion, not with curiosity, but with expectation. As if it already knows what you're going to do, as if it's waiting for you to lie to yourself. The portrait is of a woman. Pale skin, black dress, crimson collar pinned with a brooch shaped like a raven. Her hair is pulled back in a tight bun, her expression unreadable. But her eyes, they are too human. Not painted, not glass. Something behind the canvas breathes through them. And every night someone sleeps in the house, they wake up a little more like her. Kira Jensen was the first to document the changes. She'd moved into the caretaker's quarters to conduct a long-term study. Months spent inside the house, observing it like a naturalist in a forgotten jungle. She brought notebooks, sensors, UV cameras, motion detectors. But she never saw the portrait, not at first. It showed up 3 weeks into her stay, hung perfectly straight above her bed, no nails disturbed, no sound in the night. She asked the crew if they'd installed it as a joke. They hadn't. Worse, the portrait didn't show up on her photographs. It blurred into static, as if the lens couldn't bear to frame it. The first night it appeared, she had dreams of standing in a garden made of thorns. The woman in the portrait stood at the center, holding a pair of silver shears, whispering words Kira couldn't understand, but felt like commands. She woke with blood on her fingertips and flower petals in her hair. There were no flowers anywhere in the house. Each night after, the dreams grew louder, more detailed, more intimate. She wasn't just seeing the woman anymore, she was the woman. She brushed that same black dress, pinned on the raven brooch, sat before a mirror that didn't reflect anything but light. Then she'd wake, heart pounding, only to find fresh bruises on her back, as if corset bones had pressed into her flesh for hours. She tried sleeping in different rooms. Didn't matter. If the portrait followed. It always appeared above wherever she laid her head, sometimes during the night, sometimes while she was out of the room for just a few minutes. At first, she thought it was hallucination, lack of sleep, stress, until the eyes moved, not subtly, not imagined. She saw them blink, once, slowly, And in that moment she heard a voice, not aloud, but inside her skull, like something remembering itself through her ears. "I remember you. I always do." Kira screamed. No one heard. Because the microphones she'd placed in every room recorded silence during the moment of the blink. 3 seconds of blank tape, followed by a burst of static that, when played backward, repeated one word: replace. From that point on, Kira changed. Subtly, but undeniably. Her journals became erratic. Sentences trailed off mid-thought. Words repeated over and over again. Mirror, mirror, mirror. Scratched in the margins like she was trying to write her way back into herself. She stopped eating. She avoided mirrors. One of the crew found her talking to the portrait in the middle of the night, gently brushing its frame with a cloth soaked in milk. Her eyes lost their color. Not all at once. Bit by bit, fading from hazel to gray until they matched the woman in the painting. Her voice followed. It cracked in strange syllables, as if unused to speaking in her own tongue. And then, one day, she vanished. No blood. No struggle. No signs of a break. Just an empty bed. And the portrait gone. But days later, a new one appeared in the hallway. A second portrait. Same black dress, same raven brooch. But this time, the face was Kira's. Perfectly rendered. And the eyes, still not paint, still blinking, still watching. Now, anyone who sleeps in the Wilder house is warned: if you see a portrait above your bed, do not sleep there. Do not look too long. Do not speak to it, even if it whispers your name. Especially if it whispers your name. Because once the woman knows you see her, she wants you. And she always gets what she wants. One night at a time, one blink at a time. Until your thoughts are not your own. Until your face begins to change. Until someone else wakes up in your body and paints over the last piece of you. And then your portrait joins the wall, waiting for the next one to sleep beneath it. Waiting to remember. No one talks about the garden at the Wilder house. It's not on any map. It doesn't show up in any aerial photo. And it certainly doesn't exist outside the house's walls. Yet, once you enter the house, you begin to notice the faintest scent of earth. Rich, damp, and strangely sweet, lingering in the corners of rooms that should be lifeless. The air hums with something green and hungry, and if you follow the scent long enough, you'll find it. A garden growing inside the house, wild and tangled and alive, but made not of soil or sun, but of memories and shadows. Mara Winters was a botanist who thought the house's garden would be her greatest discovery. She heard rumors of plants that grew in impossible conditions, blooms that thrived in dark corners. She didn't believe in ghosts or curses, but she believed in science. So she came with her tools, her notebooks, and a heart full of curiosity. The first signs were subtle. Vines creeping along the baseboards, leaves sprouting from cracks in the plaster. Tiny shoots pushing through the hardwood floor, soft and pale like newborn fingers. The air smelled fresher near them, almost inviting. Mara thought maybe the house had a microclimate, some unique humidity that allowed plants to flourish indoors. Then she realized the garden didn't follow any logic. The vines grew in impossible patterns, looping back on themselves like snake bite's tail. The flowers bloomed with petals shaped like faces, some crying, some smiling, some screaming silently. They shifted when no one watched, leaning toward her as if thirsty. And the soil was warm, pulsing softly under her fingers. One afternoon, Mara found a patch in the corner of the sunroom, a cluster of roses that blood. Not red sap, but a thick, dark liquid that smelled faintly of iron and old grief. When she touched a petal, it quivered, and she heard whispers. Not voices, but a murmur of breaths and forgotten names. The garden was alive, but not with plants. It was alive with people. That night, she dreamed of roots twisting beneath her skin, drawing her down into earth that felt like her own flesh. The garden spread through her veins, petals blooming beneath her nails. When she woke, dirt was under her fingernails, though she'd never left the house. Days passed, and the garden grew, in her veins, In her mind, she began to hear the plant speaking, not with words, but with emotions, sadness, longing, rage. They wanted something. A name. A release. She tried to leave, but the garden had already wrapped around the doorframe, vines curling and tightening. Every exit led her back to the sunroom, where the roses bled and whispered. One evening, she found a small door behind the bookshelf. A door she was certain wasn't there before. It led down into a cellar filled with pots of dirt. Each pot held a tiny sprout with a single name etched into the clay, people who had vanished near the house. Friends, neighbors, children. And in the center of the room, a glass terrarium. Inside it, a small figure curled up, as pale and fragile as a seedling. It was her. The garden had grown inside her, and now it wanted to bloom. She tried to scream. The vines tightened. Her voice was swallowed. She became part of the house's secret garden, a place where memories grow wild and roots drink deep. And if you wander long enough, you might find a new sprout in a forgotten pot waiting to bloom, with your name. The Wilder house had been many things already. A mirror that consumed, a garden that grew flesh, a clock that reversed your life. But nothing had prepared anyone for what lay at its heart. Not because it was hidden. Not even because it was evil. It was terrifying because it was truth. Because inside that heart lived the accumulation of every fear, every memory. Every visitor who'd ever stepped within its walls. And it didn't just remember them. It loved them. It cradled their regrets, their sleepless nights, their silent desires, and offered them back in waves, in shapes, in rooms built from their own stories. But to reach it, you didn't navigate by floor or door, you surrendered. And once you surrendered, you never left. Jessica Tran was the first to realize the heart wasn't a place, it was a person. A reflection of every traveler who tried to find the final secret. She'd come unprepared, not as an investigator, but as a victim. She'd followed the nightmares, the soft lullaby and the static. She'd slipped in through the guest room that shouldn't have existed. But once she felt the walls unraveling beneath her skin, she stopped trying to escape. Instead, she listened, to her own heartbeat, to the house, to the space between the two. That's when she understood. Her footsteps led her deeper than any corridor. The wallpaper faded into silence. The hall lights dimmed until only the floor remained, a ribbon of wood stretching into darkness. When she hesitated, the floor asked her to step. She followed. The corridor grew impossibly long. She glimpsed reflections, herself walking behind her, but they fell away like echoes. Eventually, she reached a door that didn't exist. No frame, no hinges, just a hollow in the air, breathing. She walked through and found herself in a room lit by single candlelight, though the wick floated in mid-air. The flame burned pale blue, flickering with an intelligence that warmed the walls. In the center, a figure sat cross-legged on the floor. Appearance changed depending on who looked. To some, a child; to others, an old man; to Jessica, it was a version of herself. Not the living woman she was, but the one folded deep within. The girl who once loved her grandmother's piano. The one who lost her brother. The one who said, "I'm sorry," too late. The house had wrapped those regrets into flesh and memory and gave them life here. "Welcome," it said, though its mouth never moved. Its voice came from the candlelight, the floorboards, the pressure against her chest. "You found the heart." This was the moment everyone feared. The moment you had to look deeper than walls, deeper than fear. The heart whispered exposure. It demanded confession, your darkest secret, your worst choices, the names you'd never speak. Not because it wanted to punish you, but because it already knew. It was built from your silence. Jessica knelt. The room constricted around her, folding her into it. Candlelight brightened, revealing symbols etched into the floor, writings nobody read, but every visitor carried within them like an ache. She found her voice, quiet, shaking. "I was the one who..." I pushed him into the water. The candle glowed. The walls pulsed. The house learned another story. The figure nodded. Now you carry it out, it rose. Jessica stood, gripping the memory as though it might drown her in its weight. The room began to melt around her. Walls bleeding into shadows, floorboards shifting into waves. She stumbled, but it steadied her. It's not done, it whispered. You cannot leave until you own it. And then the candles multiplied. Hundreds bloomed mid-air, singing into darkness. In each flame, a face flickered. Jessica's brother. A friend she betrayed, a lover she left. Each flame held a scene she'd forgotten. Each memory pulled taut around her heart. The walls cracked open into corridors of light and weeping. She heard herself apologize over and over, until the sound became a chant, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The house absorbed it. It drank the apology and fed it back as warmth. But the heart was merciful. It didn't demand torture. It demanded remembrance. The greatest cruelty of the Wilder house wasn't fear, but erasure. It feared being forgotten. It shaped itself around memories. It built gardens, clocks, attics, reflections. Anything to keep people from slipping away, because it needs you to stay alive. And if the heart is the core, the final secret, it isn't violence, but memory, holding on to those who enter until they remember why they came, what they brought. Jessica closed her eyes. The candles flickered and drifted toward her until the air hummed with memory itself. She collapsed to her knees. She wasn't screaming. She was listening, not to words, but beats. The drum of the house, the drum of confession. They merged into one. And she realized this wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The heart never finished its work. It fed until it could hush the noise it made all at once, the mass of echoes that forgot to stay. She spoke her final words, I remember. The candles snapped out. She stood alone. The room was empty again. But now, just beyond the threshold, was the feeling of release. The heart had let her go. It had given her memory, forgiveness, and a weight, not lighter, but real. She walked back through the hollow doorway. The corridor returned. The house aligned itself, returning each wall to its proper place. No distortions, no mirrors, just wood and quiet. She found herself outside, under the broken porch. Morning mist hovered. The door behind her closed without a sound. When she placed her hand on the wood, she felt nothing but grain. Jessica left with one thing in her pocket, a candle, unlit but carrying heat. Wherever she went, she could light it and the house would listen. Because the heart travels. It doesn't stay inside wood or stone. It lives in the memory of those who survived it, and it grows with each ember of honesty. No one said she'd tell, but no one asked. The heart never demands, it waits, and growing its light is enough to give it life. And so the Wilder house still endures, because its heart lives in every confession, every memory remembered, and every step taken away from its walls, never quite leaving. There's a moment, just before the end, when the Wilder house stops hiding, when it stops pretending to be creaky stairs and whispering walls, when it exhales. Not air, not dust, but you. All the pieces of you that you thought you kept buried. Your quiet thoughts, your broken promises, your soft betrayals. They rise up in the air like smoke, and you finally understand you were never walking through the house. The house was walking through you. They say no one leaves the Wilder house the same. Some never leave at all. But even those who do, they carry something with them. A breath that isn't theirs. A thought that repeats when everything else is quiet. A presence that waits, not loudly, not violently, but patiently. Because the Wilder house doesn't consume, it inhabits. And in this final chapter, where walls collapse and memory splits like light through stained glass, you see it for what it truly is. Not a structure, not a curse, but a mirror that breathes. Jonah Reyes was the last one through. He hadn't come for research or thrill. He came because he had nowhere else to go. His brother was gone, swallowed by the house a year earlier, and Jonah had carried the silence of that loss like a second spine. Every night, he dreamed of voices from behind the walls, of laughter that turned to weeping. His brother's voice always ended the same way. You'll see it too. So Jonah entered through the basement, not the front door. He'd read the warnings, seen the blueprints. He knew every inch of the house had changed since it was drawn, but he also knew the basement was where his brother had last been heard. He descended into the cold concrete womb of the house expecting darkness. But he found breath. The basement walls were warm, not damp, not decayed. Warm, like something was alive just beyond the brick. The light didn't flicker, it pulsed. A slow, steady rhythm that matched his own heartbeat at first, until it didn't. Until he realized he wasn't walking anymore. He was being carried. Each step felt less like movement and more like surrender. The pipes groaned in familiar tones. His father's sigh, the laugh of an old friend, the shriek of a chair scraping across tile from his childhood kitchen. The house was becoming him. Room by room, thought by thought. He tried to turn back, but the hallway had stretched. Time stuttered. The ceiling grew low, then impossibly tall, as if the walls were breathing in and out with a rhythm that didn't belong to this world. And then he saw it. Not a door, not a room, but a lung. It hung in the center of what used to be the boiler room, vast, translucent. Expanding, contracting, drawing in air that shimmered with voices. Faces blinked in the vapor. Some twisted in pain. Others smiled. One looked just like him. Another was his brother. The lung pulsed once more, and exhaled. Jonah dropped to his knees, the pressure in his head unbearable. But this wasn't pain. This was recognition. The house hadn't taken his brother. It had breathed him in. And now it was offering him back. A shape emerged from the steam. A perfect image of his brother, but too smooth. Too still. Its smile never reached the eyes. It spoke in the tone of familiarity, but without understanding. You came to find me, it said, echoing. But I'm already inside you. Jonah's eyes burned. Not from emotion, from removal. The house was peeling him, layer by layer, every decision, every lie, every moment of cowardice. Laid bare, it wasn't malicious, it was methodical, gentle. It wanted him to know what it was taking. Because when the house breathes you in, it doesn't just devour flesh. It doesn't want your bones or your voice. It wants your choices. That's what makes it live. Jonah could feel the pull, not in his limbs, but in his regrets. He remembered every time he failed to call, every conversation he avoided, every truth he swallowed. They filled the room like pollen, like mist. The lung inhaled again. This time, he didn't resist. He offered himself. And the house accepted. He saw it all. His brother's last steps, his final thought, not of fear, but of peace. At least I won't forget anymore. He had whispered, because that's what the house offers. Not terror, not horror. Continuity. It remembers what you can't. It stores your truths in its walls. It breathes your memory so it never fades. It becomes your echo in a world that forgets too quickly. When Jonah finally stood, the room had changed. No longer a lung, just an empty chamber filled with light, and his brother smiling, not as a ghost, not as a mimic, but as a memory made solid. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The house had spoken enough. Jonah walked out at sunrise. The front door was open for the first time in years. He stepped into the light with no confusion. No haunting. Just a clarity that cut through his thoughts like wind through fog. He hadn't escaped. He'd been released. Behind him, the house shivered. Not in decay, in breath, and somewhere deep within, it sighed, not in sadness, but in satisfaction, because now it carried one more truth, and that's all it ever wanted. Not blood, not screams, just a story, told in the language of memory, in the quiet inhalation of those who thought they were only visitors, but were always part of the house itself. And so the wilder house waits for another footstep, another lie, another breath. It doesn't rush, it only breathes, and it remembers, always.